Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto became the Sorcerer King in Jujutsu Kaisen and fell in love with Maki. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The Stranger in a Cursed World. The first sensation was not pain, but wrongness. It was a taste in the air, a scent on the wind, a pressure against his skin that felt like spoiled milk and grave dust. Life, as Naruto Uzumaki had always known it, was a vibrant, flowing river of energy. It hummed in the leaves of trees, pulsed in the veins of his comrades, and roared like a sun in his own soul. This place was a stagnant swamp. The energy here was cloying, negative, born of rot and fear. It clung to the world like a shroud. He pushed himself up, his muscles screaming in protest. The torn remnants of his black and orange jacket fell away, revealing a body mapped with the scars of 100 battles, culminating in one that had torn a hole in reality itself. He was in an alley, hemmed in by towering, soulless monoliths of concrete and glass that scraped a bruised purple sky. Rain, thin and miserable, slicked the grime on the pavement. He didn't recognize the architecture, the language on the faded neon signs flickering fitfully in the gloom, or the oppressive spiritual weight of the atmosphere. Konoha is gone. No. That wasn't right. He closed his eyes, filtering out the foul miasma of this new world and turning his senses inward. Deep within his spiritual core, a familiar, vast consciousness stirred, not with its usual rumbling growl, but with the slow, deep cadence of a hibernating bear. Kurama. A faint, groggy pulse of warmth answered him. Alive, Kit. Just, sleeping. That last clash, it cost more than we thought. Relief, potent and dizzying, washed through him. He wasn't alone. That was all that mattered. The world could be different, he could be lost, but as long as the old fox was with him, he was home. Right, Naruto muttered, his voice hoarse. He pressed a hand to his side, feeling the raw, knitted-over flesh of a wound that should have killed him. He was weak, drained to the very dregs of his reserves. His sage mode, usually a switch he could flip in a second, felt a universe away. He was running on fumes. He stumbled out of the alley, his worn sandals slapping against the wet asphalt. The street was deserted. Cars, rusted and weather-beaten, sat abandoned. It was a dead place, a husk of a city district left to decay. But it wasn't empty. The wrongness was coalescing. Naruto stopped, his head tilting slightly. A lifetime of sensing danger had honed his instincts into a razor's edge. Even without sage mode, he could feel it. The oppressive, negative energy was gathering, swirling like dirty water down a drain. It was focusing on a point just down the street. It was focusing on him. He was a lone candle in a world of darkness, and the moths were coming. From the shell of a multi-story car park, it emerged. It was a grotesque mockery of life, a creature born from a nightmare. It had too many limbs, jointed at impossible angles, scuttling forward with a skittering sound that set his teeth on edge. Its body was a lumpy, vaguely humanoid torso of pallid flesh, but its head was a blooming flower of human hands, palms facing outward, fingers twitching and grasping at the air. In the center of that fleshy blossom, a single, weeping eye, the size of a dinner plate, swiveled to fixate on him. Naruto's battle-worn mind didn't register fear. It registered threat, classified it, and began calculating a response. This thing wasn't alive. Not really. It was a construct of pure negative emotion, given form and a ravenous, rudimentary intellect. The creature opened a slit-like mouth hidden beneath the writhing fingers of its head and spoke, its voice a chorus of whispers, like the last words of 1,000 dying victims. You are full, so full, of hope, of light, give it to me, let me taste your despair. It lunged. It wasn't just a physical attack. As it moved, the very air around Naruto grew thick with misery. He felt a phantom weight of his past failures, his inability to save Sasuke the first time, the death of his master, the pain of every friend he'd ever lost. It was a potent psychic assault, designed to cripple a person with their own regrets, to make them fall to their knees in a torrent of self-loathing. But the creature had made a fatal miscalculation. It was trying to drown a fish in water. Naruto had lived in that ocean of pain. He had swam in it, breathed it, and ultimately, conquered it. He didn't push the feelings away, he acknowledged them, accepted them as the stones upon which his life had been built. They were a part of him, but they did not define him. The psychic attack washed over him, and he simply stood there, his blue eyes clear and unwavering. The monster faltered, its single eye widening in confusion. Its ultimate weapon had done nothing. My despair. Naruto's voice was quiet, but it cut through the rain. You can't have it. I'm still using it. He took a single step forward, bringing his hands together in a seal so practiced it was pure muscle memory. Kurama is sleeping, he thought. No bijou bombs. No massive raisin shuriken. Keep it simple. Conserve what's left. He channeled the barest trickle of his own energy, the warm, golden chakra that was the essence of his life force, and molded it. It wasn't a jutsu. It was just, him. He focused it all into his right fist. The creature, recovering from its confusion, shrieked in rage and swiped at him with 3 of its spidery limbs. Naruto moved with a fluid economy that belied his exhaustion. He ducked under the first limb, swatted the second away with his left forearm, and stepped inside the arc of the third. He was too close for it to react. He drove his fist forward, not into its head, but into the center of its lumpy torso, the point where he could feel its negative energy was most concentrated. There was no grand explosion. There was no thunderous boom. There was light. A torrent of pure, golden, life-affirming energy erupted from his fist. It wasn't fire, it wasn't lightning, it was the conceptual opposite of the creature's existence. The monster didn't even have time to scream. The moment the light touched it, its form began to unravel. The negative energy that held it together didn't just dissipate, it was purified, neutralized, erased. It was like pouring sunlight into a shadow. The grotesque limbs, the hand-flower head, the weeping eye, they all dissolved into motes of harmless energy, leaving behind nothing but the clean, rain-washed scent of ozone and the sudden, shocking absence of spiritual pressure. The golden light pulsed outward in a silent, expanding sphere. It washed over the abandoned cars, the decaying buildings, the slick asphalt. For a moment, the entire district was bathed in the warmth of a rising sun. The oppressive, cloying wrongness was scoured away, leaving behind a pocket of serene neutrality in a world of hate. Then, as quickly as it had come, the light faded. Naruto stood alone in the rain, his fist still extended. He took a ragged breath, the effort costing him more than he'd anticipated. His knuckles tingled, not with pain, but with a strange, satisfying warmth. He had no idea that the exorcism he had just performed, a simple act of self-defense, had sent a shockwave across the spiritual fabric of Japan. Every high-level sorcerer, every curse user, every being attuned to the flow of cursed energy felt it. For them, it was as if a second sun had just ignited on Earth. A power source of impossible magnitude had appeared on their sensors, but it registered as a paradox, an energy signature more vast than anything they had ever conceived, yet containing zero, absolutely zero, cursed energy. It was a hole in their reality, a contradiction that their entire understanding of the world could not explain. And it was beautiful. Terrifyingly. Divinely beautiful. Gojo Satoru tasted the anomaly on his tongue like the finest, most expensive candy he'd never known existed. He was in the middle of a lecture, or rather, a one-man comedic performance that was supposed to be a lecture, for Megumi and Yuji. He had just blindfolded himself with his regular cloth, much to Yuji's confusion, to demonstrate the subtleties of cursed energy flow. You see, Yuji-kun, it's not just about punching curses really hard, though you are getting exceptionally good at that. It's about perception. It's about feeling the ebb and flow, the little eddies and currents of negative. He stopped mid-sentence. His head snapped up. Through the 6 eyes, the world was a tapestry of cursed energy, a complex and intricate dance of lines and flows. He could see the faint residue of curses in the corner of the room, the powerful curse technique simmering within Megumi, the roaring cage of Sukuna's energy inside Yuji. He saw it all, always. But now, he saw something new. A sun had just risen over Tokyo. It wasn't a physical sun. It was a cataclysmic event in the world of cursed energy. A wave of power, so immense it defied comprehension, had just washed over the city. But it was the nature of the energy that made him go utterly still. It was positive. Overwhelmingly, incandescently positive. It was the antithesis of everything their world was built on. It was like a new primary color had just been invented. "Sensei?" Yuji asked, blinking. "What's wrong?" Megumi was already tense, his hand twitching towards the shadow at his feet. "Gojo-sensei." "What was that?" Gojo didn't answer. He was already moving. He took the blindfold off, his crystalline blue eyes, the 6 eyes, wide with a mixture of exhilaration and disbelief. He focused his vision, pushing it to its absolute limit, telescoping it across the city to the source of the disturbance. And he saw him. A young man with sun-kissed blonde hair, standing alone in the rain-swept ruins of the Shinjuku exclusion zone. From this distance, he should have just been a blip, a tiny concentration of cursed energy. But he wasn't. Looking at him through the 6 eyes was like staring directly into a star. There was no cursed energy signature to read. There was only light. An endless, bottomless, self-sustaining torrent of pure, life-giving energy that was so alien, so powerful, it made the very concept of cursed energy seem like a child's scribble next to a masterpiece. The 6 eyes, which could analyze any cursed technique, any energy flow, any barrier down to its atomic components, couldn't process him. It was like trying to measure the ocean with a teaspoon. The information was too vast, too foreign. It was beautiful. And it was the most dangerous thing he had ever seen. "Stay here," Gojo said, his voice losing its usual playful lilt, replaced by a sharp, focused intensity. "Don't move. Don't let anyone in or out." And then, he was gone. He didn't run. He didn't teleport in a conventional sense. He simply compressed the space between himself and his destination. The world bent to his will. In one heartbeat, he was at Jujutsu High. In the next, he was standing on a rooftop overlooking the rain-soaked street, 100 meters from the blonde man. Naruto felt him the instant he arrived. The shift in space, the sudden appearance of a colossal, yet meticulously controlled, energy signature. It wasn't the foul, stagnant energy of the creature he'd just fought. This was different. It was vast and powerful, like a contained universe, but it was still part of the same spiritual swamp. A big, clean fish in a dirty pond. He turned his head, his blue eyes locking onto the figure on the rooftop. A tall man with shocking white hair and a black blindfold, clad in a simple dark uniform. Despite the blindfold, Naruto knew, with absolute certainty, that the man was looking right at him. Gojo grinned, a wide, predatory slash of a smile. This was it. The Black Swan. The event horizon. The thing that would change everything. He hopped down from the roof, landing as silently as a cat on the wet street. He sauntered forward, hands in his pockets, radiating an aura of untouchable confidence. Gojo called out, his voice breezy. "That was quite the light show you put on. You know, we have permits for that kind of thing. Lots of paperwork. Very boring." Naruto remained silent, his body coiled, ready for a fight or flight he knew he probably couldn't win in his current state. He watched the man approach, a strange distortion shimmering in the air around him. The raindrops weren't hitting him, they were stopping a few inches from his body, as if hitting an invisible wall. "Not much of a talker, huh?" Gojo stopped about 10 feet away. That's fine. I can talk enough for both of us. So, here's the million-dollar question. What in the world are you? Gojo tilted his head, his 6 eyes working furiously behind the blindfold, trying to make sense of the beautiful, blinding impossibility in front of him. He saw a mortal body, flesh and blood. He saw exhaustion, wounds. But he also saw a power source that felt infinite. Not cursed energy. Not reverse cursed technique. Something other. I could ask you the same thing, Naruto replied, his voice steady. He gestured vaguely at the space around Gojo. The world isn't supposed to bend like that. Gojo's grin widened. Oh, you saw that? Sharp eyes. Most people can't perceive infinity. But you don't perceive cursed energy at all, do you? And yet, you just obliterated a special grade curse with, what? Good vibes? Naruto's eyes narrowed. Special grade curse? Is that what you call those things? Among other, less polite names, Gojo confirmed. They're born from the negative emotions of humanity. We, the Jujutsu sorcerers, exorcise them to protect the non-sorcerers. You know, the usual secret war to save the world gig. Very heroic. He took another step closer. The air crackled. But the way we do it, and the way you just did it, are fundamentally different. We fight poison with a controlled poison. You just used an antidote. An antidote that no one knew existed. Naruto didn't relax. This man was powerful, maybe more powerful than anyone he'd ever met, save for literal gods. But his flippant attitude was disarming, and strangely, not malicious. He was curious. Dangerously curious. Where am I? Naruto asked, cutting to the chase. Tokyo. Shinjuku Ward, to be specific, Gojo said. Though this part's been quarantined for years. Too many curses popping up. Now, I'm guessing that doesn't mean much to you. So, let's try a bigger question. What world do you think you're in? The question hung in the air, confirming the cold dread that had been sitting in Naruto's stomach. This wasn't just a different country. This was somewhere else entirely. Not mine, Naruto admitted, his shoulders slumping just a fraction. Gojo's smile softened into something less predatory and more genuinely intrigued. Figured. Well, welcome to our messy, curse-ridden little mudball. My name is Gojo Satoru. And you, my friend, are the most interesting thing to happen here in 1,000 years. Which means my bosses, the higher-ups, are going to want to have you dissected and studied. But, lucky for you, I found you first. He gestured with a thumb over his shoulder. So, you can either stay here and wait for the scary old men to send their assassins, or you can come with me. I've got a school full of interesting kids, a comfy room, and I can promise you a decent meal. Plus, I'm the strongest, so nobody's going to mess with you while you're with me. Your choice. Naruto looked at Gojo, then at the dead, empty city around him. He was wounded, exhausted, and completely lost. This strange, blindfolded man was an unknown variable, but he was offering a sanctuary, a guarded one, to be sure, but a sanctuary nonetheless. And his instincts, honed by years of trusting others, told him that beneath the arrogance and power, Gojo was, at his core, not an enemy. What's the catch? Naruto asked. Gojo laughed, a loud, genuine bark of amusement. The catch is I get to figure out what you are. And I get to watch you turn the whole Jujutsu world on its head. It's going to be great television. He turned and started walking. Come on. I'll give you the tour. Naruto hesitated for a moment more, then followed. The first step into a new world was always the hardest. The place Gojo called Jujutsu High was a sprawling complex of traditional temples and dojos, hidden from the outside world by a powerful barrier that made Naruto's skin prickle. It was secluded, ancient, and saturated with the same controlled, potent energy as Gojo himself. Gojo led him through the grounds, keeping up a running commentary on everything, undeterred by Naruto's mostly silent responses. He was brought to a simple room, given a change of clothes, a plain black tracksuit, and a meal that he devoured with a hunger that surprised even himself. After he'd eaten, Gojo led him to a training ground where two teenagers were sparring. One was a boy with spiky black hair, his movements precise and deadly as he summoned spectral dogs from his own shadow. The other was a pink-haired boy, radiating a simple, earnest energy, but inside him, Naruto could feel it, a caged storm of malevolence that dwarfed the creature he'd fought. It was contained, but it was there, a dark mirror to the son of Kurama sleeping within him. "The brooding one is Megumi Fushiguro," Gojo announced cheerfully. "And the human golden retriever is Yuji Itadori. Kids, say hi to our new mystery guest." The two stopped sparring. Megumi's eyes were instantly wary, sizing Naruto up as a potential threat. He could feel the sheer immensity of the power rolling off the blonde man, even in his dormant state. It wasn't cursed energy, and that made it dangerous. Yuji, on the other hand, just grinned. "Whoa, cool. Are you a new teacher?" "Something like that," Gojo chirped. Naruto's gaze was fixed on Yuji. His sensory abilities were diminished, but he could still feel the bond, the horrifying symbiosis between the boy and the dark presence within him. He knew that struggle. He had lived it. He met Yuji's curious gaze and offered a small, tired smile. "Having a monster inside you doesn't make you one," he said, his voice quiet. Yuji's smile faltered, his eyes widening in shock. Megumi tensed, ready to move. They were the only ones there, aside from Gojo, who knew about Sukuna. How could this stranger possibly know? "It's the choices you make that matter," Naruto finished softly. The words, spoken with the simple authority of someone who had lived them, hit Yuji like a physical blow. He stared at Naruto, a sense of profound understanding passing between them. Before anyone could press the issue, the doors to the training ground slid open with a sharp clatter. 3 more figures entered. A talking panda, a boy with a high collar hiding his face, and a young woman with dark green hair tied back in a ponytail. She carried a 3-section staff, and her eyes, framed by a pair of glasses, burned with a fierce, defiant intensity. "Gojo-sensei," the panda said. "Principal Yaga wants a word." Something about an unauthorized guest and a massive energy flare that fried half the sensors in Tokyo. "Oops, was that me?" Gojo said, feigning innocence. Naruto barely heard them. His attention was completely captured by the girl. While the panda and the other boy had the same distinct energy signature as the others, she had almost nothing. A baseline presence, the same as any normal, non-sorcerer human. And yet, she carried herself like a predator. Every muscle in her body was a coiled spring of conditioned power. She moved with a purpose and deadliness that had been earned, not inherited. She was sparring with the panda, her staff a blur of motion. She was fast, strong, and incredibly skilled. But she was fighting an opponent whose cursed energy-reinforced body could shrug off blows that would shatter bone. She landed a dozen precise, powerful strikes, but the panda just absorbed them. He swatted her aside with a single, lazy backhand, sending her stumbling. "Not bad, Maki," the panda grunted. "But you need more power behind your hits." Another boy, a Kyoto student by his uniform who had been observing, sneered from the sidelines. "What's the point? She can't imbue her weapon with cursed energy. A monkey will always be a monkey, no matter how much it trains." Maki's knuckles went white around her weapon. A flicker of raw frustration and fury crossed her face before being suppressed behind a mask of cold indifference. She hated that word. Hated the casual disdain. Hated the unchangeable fact that in this world, she was seen as defective. Naruto saw it all. He saw her skill, her strength, her boundless will. And he saw the cage she was trapped in, a cage built by the prejudice of others. It was a story he knew better than his own name. He started walking toward her. Gojo, Megumi, and Yuji all watched, curious. The Kyoto student, Naoya Zenin, who had just insulted her, watched with a contemptuous smirk. Maki sensed him approaching and turned, her stance defensive. She saw a stranger in a plain tracksuit, his blonde hair and startlingly blue eyes a stark contrast to the gloom of the dojo. He had an aura of quiet, weary power about him that was unnerving. He stopped a few feet from her. He didn't look at her weapon. He didn't look at her lack of cursed energy, a void that was painfully obvious to every other sorcerer in the room. He looked her right in the eyes. His gaze was unnervingly clear, holding no pity, no condescension, only a simple, profound recognition. "You're strong," Naruto said. The words were simple. 4 syllables. But in that moment, they were the most revolutionary thing Maki Zenin had ever heard. No one had ever said that to her without a qualifier. You're strong for someone with no cursed energy. You're strong, but you'll never beat a real sorcerer. You're strong, but it's a waste of time. This stranger, this man who radiated the quiet authority of a king, had just stated it as a simple, undeniable fact. He wasn't grading her on their curve. He was judging her on her own merits, and he had found her worthy. Her composure, so carefully maintained, cracked. Confusion warred with a surge of something she couldn't name. A validation she didn't even know she was starving for. "What?" she managed to get out, her voice rougher than she intended. Naoya scoffed loudly. "Is this guy blind? She's a dud. The shame of the Zenin clan. She's got no cursed energy at all. She's not strong, she's a circus act." Naruto didn't even glance at him. His eyes remained locked on Maki's. "He's wrong," Naruto said, his voice calm and absolute. "Power isn't just what you're born with. It's the will to stand up when you're knocked down. It's the sweat and blood you pour into honing your skills when you have no gifts to rely on. I watched you fight. Your technique is flawless. Your speed is incredible. Your spirit is unbreakable." He gave a small, genuine smile. "That's real strength. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." The dojo fell silent. Naoya's jaw was hanging open, his face flushed with anger at being so utterly dismissed. The panda, Toge, Megumi, and Yuji were all staring, stunned by the stranger's declaration. Gojo Satoru's grin was so wide it looked like it might split his face. This was even better than he had hoped. Maki just stood there, her heart hammering against her ribs. This man saw her. He didn't see a defect, a failure, or the family's shame. He saw a warrior. And in his eyes, she saw a flicker of a shared past, the ghost of a lonely orange-clad boy sitting on a swing, ostracized for a power he couldn't control. She didn't know his story, but she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that he understood hers. The first crack in the foundation of her world had just appeared. And it looked like sunshine. Miles away, at the center of the purified crater in Shinjuku, a figure knelt. Cloaked and hooded, their form was lost in shadow. The ground still hummed with a faint, warm energy, clean and vital. All traces of the cursed spirit, and the ambient cursed energy of the area, were gone. The cloaked figure reached down with a gloved hand and scraped a sample of the energized soil into a small, lead-lined container. They rose, their head tilting up to the sky as if listening to a silent song. "It is true," a voice whispered from the hood, filled with a rapturous, terrifying reverence. "The scriptures did not lie. The sun beacon has arrived." The figure looked in the direction of Jujutsu High, a place they could sense only as a bastion of the old, flawed energy. "The arrival of the great opposition heralds the true dawn," the voice continued, soft and fanatical. "Let the sorcerers flock to their false sun. It will only make them a brighter beacon for our God's glorious hunger." The figure turned and melted back into the shadows of the ruined city, clutching the sample of purified earth like a holy relic. The awakening had begun. Chapter 2, The Law of Anomaly. The room was old, dark, and smelled of cypress wood and dust. Naruto sat on a simple tatami mat, his posture relaxed, his hands resting on his knees. The tracksuit Gojo had given him was comfortable, a stark contrast to the stifling formality of his surroundings. Across from him, Gojo Satoru was anything but formal, lounging on his side with his head propped on one hand, humming a cheerful, off-key tune as if waiting for a pot of tea to brew. In front of them, a large, ornate scroll hung on the wall. It was blank. Then, with a flicker of oppressive energy, for distinct shadows fell upon it, the paper acting as a screen. They were just silhouettes, seated figures of immense and ancient bearing. No faces were visible, only the stark outlines of old men in traditional robes. These were the higher UPS, the High Council of the Jujutsu world. A voice, dry as autumn leaves and heavy with disdain, echoed from the scroll, not through a speaker, but as a direct, chilling presence in the room. Gojo Satoru. You have overstepped. You bring an unquantifiable entity into our most sacred institution without authorization. Your arrogance will be the ruin of us all. Oh, lighten up, Gakuganji, Gojo chirped, waving a lazy hand. If my arrogance was going to ruin us, it would have happened years ago. Think of him as, a surprise transfer student. Super exotic. Do not play games, another voice hissed, this one sharp and venomous. Our sensors registered an energy discharge of unprecedented scale. An event that possessed the positive attributes of a reverse curse technique, yet was orders of magnitude greater than any ever recorded. An event that erased a special grade curse from existence. This thing you have brought here is the source. It is an anomaly that threatens the very balance of cursed energy. Exactly. Gojo sat up. Beaming. Isn't it fantastic? The balance is boring. It's rigid. It's a system that props up old fossils like you and stifles real talent. This, he gestured to Naruto, is a paradigm shift. Naruto remained silent, his gaze fixed on the shadowy figures. He'd faced councils before. Men and women who hid in the shadows, clinging to power and tradition, terrified of anything that might upset their carefully constructed world. Fear smelled the same in every universe. This entity must be classified as a curse of unknown rank and sealed immediately, the first voice commanded. Failing that, it is to be executed. Its existence cannot be tolerated. Gojo's playful demeanor vanished in an instant. The temperature in the room dropped. The air grew heavy, charged with a terrifying power that made the ancient wood of the temple creak. You can try, Gojo said, his voice soft, but laced with the chilling promise of absolute destruction. But I should warn you. He's my guest. And you'll have to get through me to reach him. And we both know how that will end, don't we? The shadows on the scroll seemed to shrink back from the sheer pressure Gojo was exuding. A tense, suffocating silence followed. Naruto finally spoke. His voice wasn't loud or threatening, but it cut through the tension with the simple clarity of a ringing bell. What are you so afraid of? The question, so direct and devoid of malice, seemed to stun the higher UPS. They were used to defiance from Gojo, but this was different. This was genuine curiosity. Afraid, one of the shadows sputtered. We are the guardians of this world. We fear nothing. You do, Naruto countered, his blue eyes unwavering. You're afraid of something you don't understand. You're afraid because your rules and your power don't apply to me. And because of that fear, your first instinct is to destroy me. He leaned forward slightly. That's not guardianship. That's cowardice. The shadows recoiled as if struck. Before they could formulate a response, Gojo clapped his hands together, shattering the tension. Well said. See? He gets it. Gojo stood up, stretching theatrically. Look, let's make a deal. You want to know what he is, what he can do. So do I. Sealing him or trying to kill him tells us nothing. Let's observe. Let's test him. He grinned. I have the perfect little field trip in mind. A test for him, and a good team-building exercise for my second years. You get your data, I get my fun, and he gets to stretch his legs. Everybody wins. The higher UPS were silent for a long moment, trapped between their terror of the anomaly and their inability to challenge Gojo directly. Finally, the central shadow spoke, its voice dripping with reluctance. Very well, Gojo. You may conduct your test. But any deviation, any sign of hostility from the entity, and we will sanction the use of any and all measures. This is your responsibility. Wouldn't have it any other way, Gojo sang. The shadows on the scroll vanished, the oppressive presence lifting from the room. Gojo turned to Naruto, his usual grin back in place. Well, that was fun. They're usually much stuffier. You really know how to get under their skin. They're weak, Naruto said, standing up. They hide behind rules because they lack the strength to make their own judgments. You've summed up the entire Jujutsu establishment in 2 sentences. I like you more and more, Gojo laughed. Now, about that field trip. How do you feel about haunted hospitals? The mission briefing was held on the same training grounds where Naruto had first met Maki. The second years, Maki, Panda, and the quiet boy, Toji Inumaki, stood in a line, listening as Gojo explained the situation with his typical flair. Okay, team. Pop quiz. What's the worst thing that can happen to a sorcerer on a mission? Gojo asked, pacing in front of them. Getting eaten. Panda offered. Salmon, Toge said, his high collar obscuring his mouth. Running out of cursed tools, Maki muttered, checking the buckle on the sheath that held her formidable spear. All good answers, but wrong. Gojo declared. The worst thing is having your cursed energy taken away. Which brings us to today's fun little outing. He tacked a photo to a notice board. It showed the derelict facade of a large, modern hospital, sealed off with yellow tape. The abandoned Seto Medical Center. For the past month, anyone who goes in, transients, urban explorers, low-grade curses, vanishes. 2 junior sorcerers sent to investigate also went missing. The reason, we believe, is a cursed womb, unborn. It's developed a rudimentary domain, not a fully realized one, but a barrier that seems to have a very specific, nasty effect. He paused for dramatic effect. It creates a zone of absolute cursed energy nullification. Panda's cheerful expression froze. Wait, nullification? Like, completely? Yep. Inside the barrier, your cursed energy reserves are sealed. Your cursed techniques won't work. Your cursed energy reinforced bodies become, well, just bodies. Gojo's gaze swept over them. For you, Panda, that means you'll be a regular panda. For you, Toge, your cursed speech will be just, speech. You'll be vulnerable. A heavy silence fell over the two. This mission wasn't just dangerous, for them, it was a potential death sentence. Gojo's gaze then landed on Maki, and his grin returned. For you, Maki, it's just another Tuesday. Maki's expression didn't change, but a flicker of grim satisfaction lit her eyes. In a place where everyone else's power was stripped away, she would be on equal footing. More than equal. This was her territory. Finally, Gojo turned to Naruto, who had been listening quietly. And for our new friend here, well, that's the big question, isn't it? What happens when you put an energy source that has no cursed energy into a field that nullifies cursed energy? He clapped his hands. It's a science experiment. Exciting. Naruto stepped forward, his eyes on the photograph of the hospital. This nullification, he asked, his voice calm and practical. Does it affect all forms of energy, or just the kind you call cursed? The question was so simple, yet so insightful, it caught Gojo off guard for a second. Excellent question. We don't know. That's part of your job, to be the guinea pig. Fine, Naruto said, his gaze shifting to the others. He looked at Toge and Panda, who were visibly shaken. Then his eyes met Maki's. I'll go. But they stay outside the barrier, he said, nodding to the two boys. If what you say is true, they'll be liabilities to themselves and to the mission. She and I will be enough. The statement was blunt, logical, and completely devoid of insult. He wasn't calling them weak, he was making a tactical assessment. Panda looked crestfallen. But we're a team. A team makes sure its members are in a position to succeed, Naruto countered calmly. Sending you in there is putting you in a position to fail. You can secure the perimeter. That's just as important. Maki stared at him, surprised. The cold, pragmatic logic was something she would have said herself, but she would have been called callous for it. Coming from him, it sounded like leadership. He wasn't sidelining them to be cruel, he was protecting them. He's right, Maki said, her voice firm. She hefted her weapon, the formidable cursed tool known as Playful Cloud. This is a job for me. The rest of you would just get in the way. She glanced at Naruto. And maybe you won't. Gojo's smile was blinding. It's decided then. The anomaly and the outcast versus the silent womb. This is going to be pay-per-view worthy. The air outside the Seto Medical Center was thick with the residue of fear and death. The building loomed over them, a monument to forgotten suffering, its windows like dead eyes. The barrier wasn't visible, but Naruto could feel it, a strange, metaphysical membrane just past the front doors. Be careful, Panda said, giving Maki a worried look. Okaka, Toge added, a note of concern in his voice. Maki just grunted, adjusting her glasses. Just keep anyone from wandering in. We'll be back before you know it. Naruto gave the two a reassuring nod, then turned to Maki. Ready? Born ready, she retorted, striding towards the entrance. They stepped through the automatic doors, which were wedged open with debris. The moment they crossed the threshold, the world changed. It was the silence. The oppressive hum of cursed energy that permeated the outside world vanished completely. For Maki, the change was subtle, like a background noise she was so used to she barely noticed it, suddenly gone. For Naruto, it was a profound relief. The world's spiritual pollution was filtered out, leaving a clean, sterile quiet. He felt lighter, clearer. Maki flexed her hands, testing her own strength. It was all there. Unchanged. She glanced at Naruto. So. Still got your mystery mojo? Naruto smiled, holding up a hand. A small, perfect sphere of swirling golden energy, no bigger than a marble, spun to life in his palm. It wasn't a Rasengan, it was just pure, raw chakra, warm and bright. It illuminated the decaying hospital lobby, casting their shadows long and sharp against the walls. Seems so. This barrier only works on your kind of energy. Maki let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Good. Then you're not useless. Despite her sharp words, a sliver of relief ran through her. She wasn't completely alone. They moved deeper into the hospital, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The place was a maze of overturned gurneys, scattered medical files, and the faint, coppery smell of old blood. The building itself seemed to be the curse. Wires snaked down from the ceiling like grasping tendrils, and patches of the wall pulsed with a faint, fleshy rhythm. They found the first victim in the emergency ward. It was a man, his body grotesquely fused into the wall, his face a mask of silent terror. He was still, but a faint, rhythmic pulse in his chest suggested he was somehow, impossibly, still alive. It's not killing them, Maki breathed, her hand tightening on her staff. It's collecting them. It's feeding on their life force. Slowly, Naruto observed, his eyes narrowed. He could feel the faint, terrified energy of the trapped man. The curse itself must be nearby. As if summoned by his words, the building groaned. Metal screeched against tile as a hulking shape emerged from the darkness at the end of the hall. It was a horrifying amalgamation of hospital equipment, gurneys, for stands, and rusted surgical tools all twisted together into a vaguely centipede-like form. At its core, nestled within the metallic cage of its body, was a pulsating, fleshy sac, the cursed womb. Dozens of thin, fleshy tubes snaked from the womb to various points in the walls and ceiling, drawing sustenance from its trapped victims. The creature's head, a cluster of sharpened bedpans and scalpels, swiveled towards them. With a shriek of scraping metal, it charged. Maki was already moving. "Stay out of my way," she yelled, a command born of habit from fighting alongside sorcerers who couldn't keep up with her raw speed. She met the creature's charge head-on, her three-section staff ablur. She spun, ducking under a sweeping limb of fused gurneys, and brought Playful Cloud crashing down on one of its metallic legs. The impact was deafening, a clang of cursed steel on mundane metal, but the leg only buckled, it didn't break. The creature retaliated, a dozen sharp appendages lashing out. Maki was a whirlwind of motion, deflecting, dodging, her footwork flawless. She was holding her own, but she was on the defensive. She couldn't generate enough force to pierce its thick, metallic hide. Then, Naruto was there. He hadn't shouted a battle cry or announced his presence. He had simply appeared at her side, moving with a silent, explosive speed that stunned her. He wasn't just fast, he was a golden blur. "The joints," he said, his voice calm in the chaos. "Aim for the fused joints." The creature swiped at him. Naruto didn't dodge. He flowed, his body moving like water around the attack, and slapped his open palm against the side of the monster's main body. A pulse of his chakra, visible for a split second as a golden ripple, flared out. It didn't do any damage, but the monster flinched back as if touched by a hot iron, its attention drawn entirely to him. It was the opening Maki needed. She didn't question it. She didn't hesitate. Reading his movement, she vaulted off a nearby counter, twisting in midair, and brought the full force of Playful Cloud down on the creature's shoulder joint, the very spot Naruto's distraction had exposed. Crack! The sound was sickening. The metallic limb, weakened by rust and stress, shattered under the focused, overwhelming force of her blow. The creature shrieked, its metallic body spasming. A perfect, unspoken synergy bloomed between them. It was a dance of pure, physical violence. Maki, with her mastery of weaponry and brute force, was the hammer. Naruto, with his impossible speed and strategic mind, was the scalpel, creating openings, diverting attacks, and pointing out weaknesses she couldn't see. He would draw the creature's attention with a feint, and she would shatter a leg. She would lock one of its limbs with her staff, and he would dart in, driving a chakra-infused kick into a weak point, the golden energy disrupting its structure. He created two shadow clones, a technique that shocked her with its simplicity and effectiveness, and they acted as perfect decoys, allowing her to get in close and deliver devastating, powerhouse blows to its central mass. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They moved as one, anticipating each other's actions, a seamless fusion of her hard-earned skill and his supernatural grace. For the first time, Maki wasn't fighting to compensate for a weakness. She was fighting as an equal, her strength perfectly complemented by her partner's. It was exhilarating. But the creature was resilient. It retreated, its metallic limbs scraping frantically as it tried to put distance between them, pulling itself towards the fleshy, pulsating womb. "It's trying to draw more power." Maki yelled, preparing to charge. "Wait." Naruto held up a hand, his eyes closed. "The core, it's not the sac." He focused, pushing his senses out, feeling past the metal and flesh. The curse was born of the hospital's pain, the fear of sickness and death. But its heart was something small and terrified. There. Inside the womb. There's something else. The original curse. It's small, and it's hiding. His eyes snapped open, locking on a specific point in the pulsating mass. Right there. 3 feet in, just to the left. That's the heart. Maki didn't doubt him for a second. The trust was absolute, forged in the heat of their perfect combat. Give me a clear shot. On it. Naruto slammed his hands on the floor. Sage art, earth style, mud wall. A thick, sturdy wall of earth erupted from the tiled floor, a technique that had no right to exist in this world, blocking the creature's retreat. It slammed into the wall, momentarily stunned. That was all the time Maki needed. She sprinted, her muscles screaming as she put every ounce of her prodigious strength into her legs. She launched herself into the air, using the earthen wall as a ramp, playful cloud held high like a javelin. For a split second, she was silhouetted against the dim light, a goddess of pure, unadulterated physical power. She drove the cursed tool forward, aiming for the exact spot Naruto had indicated. The staff punched through the metallic cage and the fleshy womb with a wet, tearing sound. There was a high-pitched, almost human scream from within the sack. The entire creature convulsed violently. Then, with a final, shuddering groan, it collapsed. The fleshy parts dissolved into black dust, and the metal construct clattered to the floor, once again just a pile of inert hospital junk. The silence that followed was absolute. The faint, fleshy pulsing in the walls ceased. The building was still. Dead. Maki landed lightly on her feet, breathing heavily, sweat beading on her brow. She pulled playful cloud free. She had done it. They had done it. Naruto walked up beside her, the earthen wall crumbling back into dust behind him. He looked at the wreckage, then at her. A genuine, unguarded smile touched his lips. Told you were strong, he said. Maki just stared at him, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She couldn't find a single sharp retort. All she could manage was a short, sharp nod. You're not so useless yourself. They emerged from the hospital, blinking in the late afternoon sun. The oppressive barrier had fallen, and the familiar, if unpleasant, hum of the cursed world washed back over them. Panda and Toge rushed forward, their relief palpable. You did it. Panda cheered. Shake, Toge agreed, giving a thumbs up. Before they could celebrate, a slow, condescending clap echoed from a nearby alley. 3 figures stepped out of the shadows. Leading them was the sneering, arrogant face of Naoya Zenin, flanked by 2 other sorcerers from his clan. Well, Naoya drawled, his eyes filled with contempt as he looked at Maki. Look what the cat dragged in. I came to see the mess, and here you are, still breathing. I'm disappointed. I was hoping the curse would have taken out the trash. Maki's jaw tightened, her knuckles white around her weapon. The euphoria of her victory evaporated, replaced by a familiar, bitter anger. After a fight where she had proven her strength beyond a shadow of a doubt, here was the voice of her family, her world, reminding her of her place. Piss off, Naoya, she spat. We're done here. Done. Naoya laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. He took a step closer, his gaze flicking over her dismissively. You're never done, Maki. You can play sorcerer all you want, swinging your little toys around. But you'll always be the girl with nothing. A stain on the Zenin name. He then glanced at Naruto. And you. I don't know who you are, but hanging around with this monkey won't do you any favors. The air went still. Panda took a protective step forward. Toge's hands were at his collar, ready to unleash a word. Maki was trembling, not with fear, but with a rage so profound it was almost suffocating. But Naruto was perfectly calm. He moved, not with speed, but with a deliberate, unhurried grace. He stepped in front of Maki, placing himself directly in Naoya's path. He wasn't posturing. He wasn't threatening. He was simply, there. A solid, immovable object. His presence alone was enough to make Naoya's 2 cronies instinctively tense up. Naruto looked Naoya up and down, a slow, analytical gaze that took in the expensive kimono, the smug posture, the inherited cursed energy that coiled around him like a royal mantle. "That power you have," Naruto said, his voice even, almost conversational. "The one you were born with. The one you're so proud of." Naoya's smirk widened. "My projection sorcery? It's the pinnacle of the Zenin techniques. Something a couple of rejects like you could never comprehend." "Right," Naruto said, nodding slowly. "That one." He met Naoya's arrogant gaze, and his blue eyes were as clear and deep as the open sky. "Have you ever won a real fight without it?" The question was a surgeon's scalpel. It didn't shout, it cut. It slipped past Naoya's arrogance, past his pride, and struck directly at the hollow core of his being. It didn't challenge his strength, it questioned its very foundation. The implication was devastatingly simple: without the gift he was born with, was he anything at all? Naoya's face went from smug, to confused, to a blotchy, furious red. He opened his mouth, then closed it. There was no answer that wouldn't diminish him. He, who defined his entire worth by his inherited technique, was just asked to imagine himself without it. And the image, for a split second, was one of utter worthlessness. He had been so completely and utterly dismantled by a single, quiet question. "You, who the hell do you think you are?" he finally sputtered, his voice cracking with humiliation and rage. Naruto didn't answer. He just held his gaze, his silence a more damning response than any insult could ever be. He had already won. With a wordless snarl of fury, Naoya turned on his heel and stormed away, his cronies scrambling to follow. "This isn't over," he threw over his shoulder, a hollow, childish threat. Naruto watched him go, then turned back to Maki. The rage in her eyes had been replaced by a stunned, complex mixture of shock and dawning realization. He hadn't fought her battle for her. He had simply exposed her enemy's weakness with a truth she had always known but never been able to articulate. "He relies on his technique because it's all he has," Naruto said quietly, "for her alone. You rely on yourself. That's why you're stronger." She looked from the retreating form of her cousin to the calm, steady face of the man in front of her. This stranger, this anomaly, had defended her more profoundly in 30 seconds than anyone had in her entire life. As they started the walk back to the school, an unspoken alliance had been forged, not just in the crucible of battle, but in the simple, powerful act of mutual respect. He was her ally. And for the first time, Maki Zenin felt like she wasn't fighting the world entirely on her own. Far away, in a dark room illuminated only by the glow of a dozen monitors, Kenjaku watched the last of the footage. He had a small, almost undetectable curse fly acting as his camera, and it had captured everything. The interrogation. The mission. The flawless synergy between the anomaly and the Zenin outcast. The verbal evisceration of Naoya. A slow, delighted smile spread across his stitched face. "Oh, this is magnificent," he whispered to himself, his ancient eyes alight with intellectual fervor. "He is not a hammer. He is a solvent." He watched Naruto's quiet declaration to the higher UPS. He was breaking their confidence. He watched him fight alongside Maki, empowering her, validating her, turning a clan's failure into a powerhouse. He was breaking their social structure. He watched him humiliate Naoya, the heir to the most traditionalist faction. He was breaking their pride. He is dissolving the very foundations of this rigid, stagnant world without even trying, Kenjaku mused, his fingers steepled before him. He is the perfect catalyst. The black swan I have waited centuries for. His gaze shifted to another monitor, which displayed astronomical charts and complex energy readings centered on a single, dark point in deep space. And the timing, perfection. He chuckled softly. The Hoshikue, the Star Eaters, are growing bolder. Their primitive faith in Amatsu no Kagasio is causing localized reality distortions. They believe this sun beacon's arrival is a sign for their god. He leaned back, a grand, terrible strategy clicking into place in his millennia-old mind. The fools thought Naruto was their enemy, the great opposition foretold in their scripture. They would throw themselves at him. Let them, Kenjaku whispered to the empty room. Let the zealots and their sleeping god focus on the bright, shining sun. It will provide the perfect distraction for my own harvest. He had a world to reshape. And now, he had the perfect storm of chaos to do it in. Chapter 3, The Unsanctioned Goodwill. The Kyoto Sister School Exchange event had always been a thinly veiled proxy war. It was a chance for the two main branches of Jujutsu High to measure each other's strength, settle old rivalries, and for the students to engage in what amounted to sanctioned, high-stakes violence. This year, however, was different. This year, the unofficial, primary objective, whispered down from the higher UPS to the Kyoto faculty, was singular and unprecedented: probe the anomaly. The order was to measure Naruto Uzumaki. Test his limits, his durability, his temperament. Discover a weakness. And, if the opportunity presented itself, if he could be isolated and an accident could be convincingly staged, neutralize him. The threat he posed to the established order was too great to be left unchecked. Naruto stood on the sidelines with Gojo, observing the opening proceedings. The Kyoto students were a stark contrast to the Tokyo crew. They were more formal, more rigid, their faces etched with a disciplined seriousness that bordered on hostility. Their leader, a prim girl with a broom named Momo, was reading the official rules for the team battle, but everyone knew the real game had already begun. Feeling the love? Gojo asked, nudging Naruto with his elbow. The tall, scarred one, he's been staring at you since he arrived. And I think the old man, Gakaganji, is trying to bore a hole in your head with his eyes. Naruto's gaze swept over the Kyoto students. He could feel their animosity, a palpable wave of suspicion and intent. It was familiar. He'd walked into villages and faced the exact same wall of distrust 100 times. But his attention was drawn, like Gojo's, to the mountain of a man named Aoi Tadu. Unlike the others, Tadu wasn't looking at him with hostility. He was studying him with an intense, analytical curiosity, his brow furrowed in deep thought. He's different, Naruto noted. He's not afraid. He's trying to understand. That's Tadu for you, Gojo chuckled. He's a powerhouse, a bit of an eccentric, but brutally honest. He judges people not by their rank or technique, but by their soul, as he puts it. Be ready for a very strange conversation if he corners you. The event began. The first contest was a race between the teams to exorcise low-grade curses scattered across the sprawling school grounds. Naruto was officially an observer, a role that suited him just fine. He watched as the Tokyo team, Maki, Panda, Toge, Megumi, and Nobara Kujisaki, a fierce girl with a hammer and nails, shot off into the forest. The Kyoto team followed, though they quickly split up, their movements coordinated and predatory. Naruto stayed with Gojo and the faculty, watching the event on a series of monitor screens set up by Gojo himself. Each screen followed a different student via a small, nearly undetectable curse Gojo had set loose. So, Naruto asked, his eyes on the screen showing Maki gracefully vaulting through the trees, this is how you train them? By having them fight each other? It's tradition, Gojo said with a shrug. Teaches them teamwork, improvisation, and that a fellow sorcerer can be just as dangerous as any curse. A valuable lesson. Naruto's brow furrowed. It also teaches them to see each other as rivals first, and comrades second. It breeds division. Before Gojo could respond, a flicker of movement on the monitors caught Naruto's eye. It was subtle, but unmistakable. 3 Kyoto students, Momo on her broom, a quiet boy with a mechanical puppet, and Maizenin, Maki's twin sister, were not hunting curses. They were converging on Maki's position. They're not playing the game, Naruto said, his voice flat. Looks like the probe is beginning, Gojo replied, a hint of steel in his tone. He made no move to intervene. This was part of the test, for both Naruto and his students. On the screen, Maki found herself cornered. Mai stood before her, a revolver in her hand, her face a mask of cold disdain. Still playing make-believe, sister. You should have just stayed home and served tea. It's the most a defect like you can hope for. Maki spun playful cloud, her expression grim. I don't have time for you, Mai. We're going to make time, Mai sneered, raising her gun. From the trees, Momo swooped down, unleashing a blast of wind, while Mekamaru's puppet fired a beam of cursed energy. It was a coordinated ambush. Naruto watched, his fists clenching at his sides. He saw Maki grit her teeth, her body tensing to face the 3-on-1 assault. He knew she could handle it. She was strong enough. But the unfairness of it, the sheer malice behind the attack, grated on him. This wasn't a test of strength. It was a petty, cruel attempt to break her spirit. Then, chaos erupted. On another screen, Aoi Tadu had cornered Megumi Fushiguro. But instead of fighting, he was yelling at him, demanding to know what kind of woman was his type. The bizarre confrontation was quickly escalating into a one-sided beatdown. At the same time, a new energy signature flared on the edge of the grounds. It was powerful, malignant, and not part of the event. Well now, Gojo said, his relaxed posture stiffening. That's not one of mine. An alarm blared across the compound. One of the supervising teachers shouted, unidentified cursed spirits. High grade. They've breached the barrier. On the monitors, the forest floor began to writhe. Gnarled, monstrous curses, far stronger than the low-grade fodder intended for the event, clawed their way out of the ground. It was a manufactured accident. A deliberate escalation. Someone had used the Goodwill event as cover to launch a direct attack. The students, who had been focused on each other, were now thrown into a desperate fight for survival. The race had become a slaughter. Gojo was about to move, but Naruto put a hand on his shoulder. Your students can handle the small ones, Naruto said, his eyes scanning the monitors with tactical precision. But that one. He pointed to a screen where a massive, tree-like curse with branches like sharpened spears was bearing down on a terrified Momo and a wounded Mai. Is different. It's special grade. Stay here, Gojo ordered the other teachers. Protect the grounds. He looked at Naruto. You sure about this? It's about to get messy. I was born in a mess, Naruto replied. Then, he vanished in a blur of speed that left the other faculty members reeling. My Zenin fired another cursed energy-infused bullet into the creature's bark-like hide. It ricocheted harmlessly. The thing was a monster, shrugging off their attacks as if they were mosquito bites. One of its spear-like branches had already skewered Mekamaru's puppet, disabling him, and another had swatted Momo from the sky. Mai was alone, her bravado crumbling into stark terror as the creature loomed over her, its woody maw opening to reveal a swirling vortex of negative energy. She closed her eyes, bracing for the end. A flash of gold. A figure landed between her and the curse, so fast he seemed to materialize from thin air. He didn't even look at the monster. He glanced over his shoulder at her, his blue eyes holding no judgment, only a calm, focused intensity. You're Maki's sister, right? Naruto asked, as if they were having a casual chat in the middle of a park. Mai was too stunned to speak. She could only nod, her revolver feeling suddenly useless and small in her hand. Good, Naruto said. Then try to keep up. He turned to face the special grade. The curse unleashed a volley of dozens of wooden spears, each one capable of piercing steel. Naruto simply held up a hand. A swirling, transparent dome of golden energy, a rudimentary application of his chakra cloak, flared to life around him. The spears impacted against it and disintegrated into sawdust. My turn, Naruto said, and blurred forward. He wasn't fighting like a sorcerer. He was fighting like a force of nature. He ran up the creature's trunk, his feet sticking to the bark with chakra control, dodging its flailing limbs with impossible agility. He formed a Rasengan in his palm, the swirling ball of pure chakra a stark contrast to the cursed world around him. He slammed it into the creature's main body. The resulting explosion of power tore a gaping hole in the curse, but it wasn't enough. The creature was ancient, resilient, its cursed energy regenerating the wound almost instantly. It roared, shaking the entire forest, and focused all its attention on Naruto. This was the opening the others needed. Now, a booming voice roared. Aoi to do, his shirt now completely gone, came flying through the trees, his face alight with battle-crazed joy. He had abandoned his fight with Megumi the moment the real threat appeared. Boogie woogie. He clapped his hands. In that instant, he switched Naruto's position with a massive boulder high in the air. The curse, its attack aimed at Naruto, suddenly found itself impaling solid rock. Naruto, now falling from the sky, simply corrected his trajectory in midair. He saw To-Do on the ground, grinning up at him, a silent invitation in his eyes. He saw Panda and Toge fighting back-to-back, and he saw Maki, her face a mask of fierce determination, charging towards the main battle. This was it. This was what he was good at. Bringing people together in the chaos of a fight. He landed beside To-Do, who was already sizing up the recovering curse. "You're the new guy." To-Do boomed. "Blonde hair, strong spirit. I approve. My besto friendo, Itadori Yuji, also has a good soul. Tell me, what kind of woman is your type?" Naruto didn't even blink. He was used to strange allies with even stranger questions. "A strong one," he replied instantly, his eyes on the curse. "Someone with an unbreakable will, who fights for what she believes in, even when the whole world tells her she can't." To-Do's eyes widened, then filled with tears of profound joy. He slapped Naruto on the back with enough force to stagger a normal man. "A magnificent answer. You have taste. From this moment on, you, Naruto Uzumaki, are also my besto friendo." "Right," Naruto said, grinning. "Good to know. Now, how about we take this thing down, friend?" What followed was not a battle, but a symphony of destruction. To-Do's boogie-woogie technique was a nightmare of tactical chaos. With every clap of his hands, he swapped positions, turning the battlefield into a three-dimensional shell game. He would swap Naruto with a tree, a curse, even one of his own comrades, creating impossible attack vectors and last-second evasions. And Naruto adapted to it instantly. To-Do clapped, and suddenly Naruto was behind the special grade. He drove a chakra-infused kick into its back, sending it stumbling forward. To-Do clapped again, swapping places with Panda, who met the stumbling curse with a bone-shattering tackle. Boogie woogie. To-Do roared, and now Toge was where Panda had been, his collar pulled down. Crush M. Toge commanded, his cursed speech hitting the disoriented curse at point-blank range, causing its legs to buckle. It was in that moment of weakness that Maki arrived. She moved with a deadly, focused grace, her eyes locked on the creature's core, which had been momentarily exposed. She was a silver-green blur, a living spear aimed at the heart of the battle. But her path was blocked by one of the curse's thick, defensive limbs. To-Do saw it. Naruto saw it. "Friendo!" To-Do yelled. Naruto didn't need the prompt. He created a dozen shadow clones. They swarmed the curse, not to attack it, but to obstruct it. They grabbed its limbs, climbed its body, a chaotic, orange and black wave of distractions. "Now, Maki!" Naruto roared, his voice cutting through the din. To-Do clapped one last time. He swapped Maki's position with Naruto's lead clone, which was standing directly in front of the curse's exposed core. In a dizzying instant, Maki found herself exactly where she needed to be. There was no time to think, only to act. She poured every ounce of her strength, every bit of her frustration, every iota of her indomitable will into one perfect, final strike. Playful cloud hit the special grade's core with the force of a meteor. The curse gave a final, silent scream. Not of sound, but of disintegrating energy. A shockwave of cursed energy erupted from its core, but it was a death knell, not an attack. The massive, tree-like body cracked, splintered, and then dissolved into a torrent of black ash that rained down over the silent forest. The goodwill event was over. The students, both from Kyoto and Tokyo, stood amidst the dissipating ash, breathing heavily, their bodies bruised and battered. Mai was helping a shaken Momo to her feet, her earlier animosity forgotten in the face of shared survival. Megumi stood beside a grinning To-Do, a look of weary resignation on his face. And in the center of the clearing stood Naruto and Maki. His clones had vanished, and he was looking at her, a proud, brilliant smile on his face. She was leaning on her weapon, catching her breath, but her eyes, when they met his, were shining with a triumphant fire he had never seen in them before. They hadn't just fought together. They had led. In the aftermath of the chaos, Naruto walked through the makeshift triage area, his sensory abilities allowing him to easily find the most gravely injured. He moved from student to student, placing a hand on their wounds. A warm, green light would glow from his palm, the mystical palm technique, a basic medical ninjutsu, and the wounds would begin to knit back together. Torn muscles mended, deep gashes closed, and exhaustion receded. The students, who had been bracing for days of recovery, watched in stunned silence. This wasn't the crude, powerful healing of a reverse curse technique. This was something gentler, more fundamental. It was life energy, coaxing their own bodies to heal at an accelerated rate. He knelt beside a suspicious Mai, whose arm was badly sprained. She flinched as he reached for her, but he just gently took her arm, and the warm, green energy washed over her. The pain vanished, and the swelling receded. She stared at her perfectly healed arm, then at him, her mind unable to process the quiet, unconditional act of kindness. He had saved her life, and now he was healing her, without a single word of reproach. When he was done, he stood up, finding himself the center of attention. The students of both schools were looking at him, not with fear or suspicion, but with a newfound respect that bordered on awe. He had saved them, coordinated them, and healed them. He addressed them all, his voice carrying easily across the quiet clearing. It wasn't the voice of a commander, but of a comrade. "You all fought well today," he began. "You faced an unexpected threat, and you survived. But you were fighting two wars at once. One against the curses, and one against each other." His gaze swept over the Kyoto students, then the Tokyo students. "This world you live in, with its obsession with inherited techniques, with clans, with schools, it's a cage. It turns potential allies into rivals. It makes you point your weapons at each other, like you did today," he said, his eyes briefly flicking to Mai and Maki, "while the real enemy gathers in the shadows. That's a weakness." He took a step forward, his presence commanding, his charisma a palpable force. "Look around you," he declared, his voice rising with passion. "You fought together. You combined your strengths. A girl with no cursed energy dealt the final blow because a man who can swap places put her there, and because clones created a distraction, and because another boy's words stunned the beast. You didn't win because of your individual techniques. You won because you trusted each other for 5 minutes." He let the words sink in. True strength isn't the power you're born with. It's the will to protect the person standing next to you. It's the courage to shatter your own limits, and to help others shatter theirs. Forget Kyoto. Forget Tokyo. Forget the Zenin clan or the Gojo clan. When an enemy like that, he gestured to the spot where the curse had died, comes knocking, none of that matters. All that matters is the bond between comrades. He had, without a single threat or boast, launched an ideological assault on the entire philosophical foundation of their world. He wasn't just telling them a different way to fight, he was telling them a different way to be. Aoi To-Do was crying openly, unashamedly. A true leader. My besto friendo speaks the truth. Kyuzukabe, one of the Tokyo teachers, looked on with a grudging respect. The kids were listening. They were truly listening. In that moment, standing amidst the wreckage of a failed ambush and the ashes of a defeated special grade, Naruto Uzumaki wasn't an anomaly to be tested. He was a leader to be followed. He had, without ever wanting it, thrown down a gauntlet to the old guard. He had planted the seeds of a revolution in the hearts of the next generation. Hidden deep within the bowels of Jujutsu High, in the sealed archives known as the Tingen-sama's vault, a security curse let out a silent shriek before dissolving into dust. A cloaked figure, identical to the one that had gathered soil in Shinjuku, slipped through the now unprotected doorway. The air inside was thick with ancient, powerful cursed energy, centered on the base of the tree-like being that was Tengen. The Star Eater ignored it. They weren't here for the ancient sorcerer. They moved with purpose to a section of the archives that contained the oldest, most esoteric texts, records from before the codification of modern jujitsu. Their gloved fingers ran over ancient scrolls, their head tilted as if listening to a distant whisper. They were looking for something specific. A map. Not of the land, but of energy. A map of the network of barriers that Tengen had created across Japan, the very system that stabilized cursed energy for the entire country. The figure paused, pulling out a crumbling scroll. The characters were archaic, almost indecipherable. But they depicted Japan, and across it, a series of lines and nodes of power. The scroll was titled, On the Sealing of the Celestial Gate and the Pacification of the Star-Devouring Kami. The Star Eater unrolled it. The map was overlaid with astronomical charts and religious iconography. It showed how Tengen's barrier system was not just for managing cursed energy. Its primary, long-forgotten purpose was to act as a lock. A divine seal. And the scroll showed where to find the keyholes. The sun beacon's radiance weakens the old locks, the figure whispered, their voice filled with ecstatic reverence. Now, we have the map to unmake their world. They rolled up the scroll, tucking it into their cloak. They had what they came for. The Goodwill event had provided the perfect chaos to mask their infiltration. The dawn of their god was one step closer. Chapter 4, The Limitless and the Impossible. The air in the pocket dimension crackled. It was a vast, empty expanse of pure white, a canvas wiped clean of all reality, stretching to an infinite horizon under a featureless white sky. Gojo Satoru had created this space, a personal training ground stitched together with his cursed energy, for one purpose, to unleash his power without consequence. Today, the consequence he sought to avoid was the utter annihilation of the Japanese countryside. So, Gojo said, stretching his arms over his head with a theatrical yawn. You've been here a few weeks. You fought a curse, humiliated a Zenin, and turned my students into your own personal fan club. He lowered his arms, and the playful energy around him sharpened, coalescing into something formidable and keen. I think it's time we stopped dancing around the main event. He stood 100 yards away from Naruto, a black-clad figure against the stark whiteness. He slowly began to unwind the blindfold from his eyes. I am the strongest, Gojo stated, not as a boast, but as a simple, universally acknowledged fact. My 6 eyes perceive the world in terms of cursed energy down to an atomic level. My limitless technique allows me to manipulate and distort space itself. I am, for all intents and purposes, untouchable. He pulled the blindfold away. His eyes, a brilliant, crystalline blue that seemed to contain entire galaxies, fixed on Naruto. The sheer amount of information pouring into him was staggering. Seeing Naruto with the 6 eyes was still like looking into the heart of a sun, but now, Gojo was actively trying to dissect that light. But you. Gojo continued, his voice losing its playful edge, you are an impossibility. You are a living paradox. The 6 eyes tell me you exist, but they can't tell me how. The energy you wield is anathema to this world. I need to understand it. I need to touch it. Naruto stood calmly, his hands in the pockets of his now familiar black tracksuit. He had agreed to this spar without hesitation. He was curious, too. Gojo's power was unlike anything he had ever encountered. It wasn't the raw, destructive force of a tailed beast or the elegant elemental mastery of a shinobi. It was a fundamental violation of the laws of physics as he knew them. You want to understand? Naruto said, a small smile playing on his lips. Fine. But understanding isn't something you can get by just looking. He closed his eyes. The world around him went silent. He wasn't seeing with his eyes anymore. He was feeling. He drew upon the natural energy of this sterile, artificial dimension. It was thin, almost non-existent, but it was there. The faint, humming signature of Gojo's own power holding it all together. Orange pigmentation bloomed around his eyes, the perfect, sharp markings of a sage. When he opened his eyes again, they were a brilliant gold with a horizontal, toad-like bar. He had entered sage mode. Gojo's breath hitched. Through the 6 eyes, the change was cataclysmic. Naruto was no longer just a son. He was a son that had just connected to the entire universe. Gojo could now perceive the faint tendrils of natural energy flowing from the very fabric of his pocket dimension into Naruto, mixing with the colossal energy already inside him. It wasn't cursed energy. It was the life force of the world itself, and Naruto was commanding it as easily as breathing. There, Naruto said, his voice now resonating with a deeper, more ancient power. Now you can try to touch me. Gojo grinned, a wide, feral expression of pure exhilaration. Gladly. He vanished. To a normal eye, he would have simply disappeared. But to Naruto's sage mode senses, he didn't teleport. He just arrived. He had compressed the space between them, and was now standing directly in front of Naruto, his fist cocked back for a blow that could shatter a mountain. Naruto didn't try to dodge. He simply raised his own fist to meet Gojo's. Their knuckles were inches apart. Then, Gojo's fist stopped. It just stopped. As if it had hit an invisible, infinitely resilient wall. The air around Naruto shimmered, but his body hadn't moved at all. This was infinity. The convergence of an infinite series. Gojo's technique created a space between himself and any incoming object where the distance could be divided an infinite number of times. An object approaching him would slow infinitely, never quite reaching its target. It was the perfect, absolute defense. Gojo watched Naruto's face, expecting to see shock or confusion. Instead, he saw concentration. Naruto's sage-enhanced eyes weren't looking at Gojo's fist. They were looking at the space around Gojo's fist. He could see it now. The subtle, masterful manipulation of cursed energy creating the paradox. Gojo wasn't building a wall. He was corrupting the very concept of distance. Interesting, Naruto murmured. He pulled his fist back. Then, he thrust it forward again. But this time, he wasn't just throwing a punch. He pushed his own sage-infused chakra forward, not as an attack, but as a wave of pure, natural energy. He wasn't targeting Gojo's body. He was targeting the flow of cursed energy that sustained the infinity. It was like throwing a stone into a perfectly still pond. Gojo felt a jolt. The natural energy, so fundamentally different from cursed energy, couldn't be stopped by his infinity. It passed right through it. It didn't harm him, but it momentarily disrupted the delicate, precise control he maintained over the space around him. For 1/100th of a second, the infinity flickered. It was all the time Naruto needed. His fist, following in the wake of his chakra, passed through the stuttering barrier and continued on its path. Gojo's eyes widened in genuine shock. He had to physically move, twisting his body to the side to avoid a punch that should have been impossible. Naruto's knuckles grazed his cheek. It was the first time in over a decade that an attack he hadn't allowed to hit him had made physical contact. He jumped back, a wild, ecstatic laugh bubbling out of him. You can touch me. You can actually touch me. How? Your wall isn't real, Naruto explained, settling back into a ready stance. It's an illusion made of your energy. I can't break the wall. But I can disturb the energy making it. Incredible. Gojo's mind was racing, the six eyes processing the data at ludicrous speed. He had found the loophole. A direct physical attack wouldn't work. But an attack on the energy powering his technique. So it's a battle of control, then. Let's see how you handle this. He raised his hand, fingers splayed. Cursed technique lapse, blue. A point in space next to Naruto suddenly collapsed, generating an impossible gravitational pull. It was a miniature black hole, designed to suck in everything around it and crush it into nothing. The white floor of the dimension cracked and splintered, being torn towards the singularity. Naruto didn't try to fight the pull. He used it. He pushed off the ground, letting the blue pull him forward at an incredible speed, then used his chakra to plant his feet on a piece of debris it was pulling in, launching himself off it like a slingshot, directly at Gojo. Gojo was already prepared. Cursed technique reversal, red. A brilliant crimson orb of repulsive force erupted from his other hand. It was the opposite of blue, an explosive blast of power that would obliterate anything it touched. He fired it directly at the airborne Naruto. This was a lethal pincer. Be crushed by blue, or be vaporized by red. Naruto brought his hands together. Shadow Clone Jutsu. In a puff of smoke, 20 Narutos appeared in the air around him. The clones immediately scattered, a chaotic storm of orange and black. Some were sucked into the blue, vanishing with a pop. Others were blasted by the red, disintegrating instantly. But they served their purpose. They were a sensory overload, even for the six eyes. The real Naruto, hidden amongst the chaos, was plummeting towards the ground between the two attacks. As he fell, he gathered a spiraling ball of chakra in his hand. But this one was different. It was larger, fiercer, and infused with the raw, untamed energy of the wind. Wind style, Raisin Shuriken. He hurled the shrieking, discus-like projectile not at Gojo, but at the point in space between blue and red. The result was something Gojo could never have predicted. The Raisin Shuriken wasn't an attack of pure force, it was composed of billions of microscopic wind blades. When it hit the violently unstable space between a powerful attractive force and a powerful repulsive force, it didn't just detonate. It acted as a catalyst. The two forces, red and blue, slammed into each other, drawn together by the vortex of the Raisin Shuriken. Hollow purple. Gojo whispered the name of the technique as he witnessed its accidental, bastardized creation. A massive, roiling sphere of imaginary mass erupted between them, erasing everything it touched from existence. It tore a hole not just in the floor of the pocket dimension, but in the very concept of space it occupied. Naruto, having used the recoil of his throw to propel himself away, landed skidding on the white floor, watching as a chunk of Gojo's perfect world was simply deleted. Gojo stared at the void, then back at Naruto, his mind reeling. You forced a collision. You created a makeshift hollow purple. No one can do that. No one should even know how. I saw you had a pull and a push, Naruto said, his sage mode senses analyzing the aftermath. It seemed logical that putting them together would do that. Gojo started laughing again, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. This was the most fun he'd had in his entire life. He was being pushed. He was being challenged. He was learning. Alright, playtime's over, Gojo said, his voice resonating with an almost divine level of power. He brought his hands together, his cursed energy flaring to an astronomical degree. The entire dimension seemed to groan under the strain. You've shown me you can touch the untouchable. You've shown me you can replicate the impossible. Now let me show you what happens when I get serious. He was preparing for his domain expansion. Unlimited void. The ultimate expression of his power, a technique that would flood his opponent's mind with an infinite stream of information, rendering them catatonic. It was an absolute, unblockable hit. Naruto felt the shift. The very laws of the dimension were being rewritten around him. He braced himself, gathering his own chakra. He didn't know what was coming, but he knew it was a conceptual attack, an attack on the mind and soul. He extended the golden aura of his chakra cloak, Kurama's energy now stirring from its slumber, roused by the sheer scale of the power Gojo was emitting. And then, it stopped. Gojo froze, his hand still in the seal for his domain. His head snapped to the side, his 6 eyes looking past Naruto, past the walls of his pocket dimension, into the real world beyond. His expression of ecstatic joy was replaced by one of cold, sudden fury. Naruto felt it a second later. A series of powerful, malevolent energy signatures had just appeared. Not in one place. All over Japan. Coordinated. Precise. And their techniques were bizarre, alien. They felt cosmic. "They're attacking," Gojo said, his voice dangerously low. "Now." All at once. He dropped his hands, the pocket dimension wavering around them. "Our spar is over." "Who are they?" Naruto asked, letting his sage mode fade. "The ones who screwed up the Goodwill event, I'd bet," Gojo replied, his tone grim. "Fanatics. A death cult. They call themselves the Star Eaters." He looked at Naruto, his crystalline eyes holding a new, grudging respect. "And I think they're here for you." The white world dissolved around them, and they were back in the now ruined training field at Jujutsu High. The sky outside was a normal blue, but to their senses, it was on fire. A dozen figures in dark, hooded cloaks were standing in a circle around the training field. They had bypassed Tengen's main barrier entirely. Their cursed energy felt wrong, warped, as if filtered through a strange, cosmic lens. The leader, a tall figure whose face was hidden in shadow, held a staff topped with a strange, multifaceted crystal that seemed to drink the light. Gojo Satoru, the 6 eyes, the leader's voice was a dry, rustling whisper, like starlight traveling across an empty void. "You stand in the presence of the sun beacon. The great opposition. Surrender him to us, and we will grant you a swift death when our god awakens." Gojo scoffed, stepping forward to stand beside Naruto. "A new god? Sorry, that position is already filled. By me." The leader ignored him, his shadowy gaze fixed on Naruto. "You are the antithesis. Your light is a blasphemy against the beautiful, final silence of the void. You are a cancer on reality. We are the cure." Naruto just looked at them, his expression unreadable. Another group of sad, lost people who think destruction is the same as salvation. "I've met your kind before. We are not lost," the leader hissed. "We are heralds." He slammed his staff on the ground. The crystal on top flared with a sickly purple light. The space around Gojo and Naruto warped violently. It wasn't like Gojo's controlled compression of distance. This was a chaotic, violent twisting of reality. The ground beneath their feet bent into a non-Euclidean angle, and the sky seemed to fold in on itself. Their techniques attack space itself, Gojo noted, his 6 eyes analyzing the effect. Crude, but effective. "They're trying to tear us apart." His infinity flared, neutralizing the spatial distortion in their immediate vicinity, creating a bubble of stability in the chaos. The other Star Eaters attacked. They didn't use conventional cursed techniques. One threw orbs of pure darkness that didn't explode, but deleted whatever they touched. Another chanted in a guttural language, and the very laws of physics began to fray, causing gravity to fluctuate wildly. It was an assault designed to overwhelm even the strongest. They weren't trying to fight Gojo on his terms, they were trying to break the rules of the game entirely. Gojo clicked his tongue in annoyance. This is going to be a pain to clean up. He moved, a blur of motion, appearing behind one of the Star Eaters and dispatching him with a single, precise blow to the neck. Naruto moved too. He didn't need to worry about the spatial warping. His connection to natural energy gave him a fundamental anchor to reality that their techniques couldn't sever. He flashed through the fluctuating gravity, his movements sure and steady, and appeared in front of the Star Eater throwing orbs of darkness. The cultist hurled another orb. Naruto didn't dodge. He swatted it. His hand, cloaked in Kurama's now awakened crimson chakra, met the orb of nothingness. There was no explosion. The two opposite concepts, the energy of pure life and the energy of pure void, annihilated each other in a silent flash of gray light. The Star Eater stared in disbelief, then Naruto's fist connected with his chest, and he crumpled to the ground. It was a strange, desperate battle. Gojo, the master of his domain, was forced onto the defensive, his infinity working overtime to negate the constant, chaotic reality bending. Naruto, the outsider, was the one on the offensive, his power a perfect, straightforward counter to their esoteric abilities. They fought back to back, a grudging but devastatingly effective team. The untouchable god and the impossible anomaly. The Star Eater lieutenant, the one with the staff, watched his forces being dismantled. He realized they had underestimated their targets. Gojo Satoru was a known quantity of immense power. But the Sun Beacon, he was not a passive source of energy. He was a warrior. Enough, the lieutenant roared, slamming his staff down again. Behold the wrath of the heavens. He channeled all his power into the crystal. A tear in the sky above them ripped open, not a hole to a different place, but a wound in the fabric of reality itself. Through it, the cold, terrifying blackness of deep space was visible, along with a single, malevolent red star. A beam of reddish-black energy, visible cosmic radiation, shot from the star, through the tear, and lanced down towards them. This wasn't a cursed technique. This was a direct attack from a celestial body, channeled by the cultist. Gojo's eyes widened. His infinity could stop it, but the sheer energy required would be immense. It would leave him drained. Before he could act, Naruto stepped in front of him. The crimson chakra cloak around him exploded outward, taking the form of a massive, nine-tailed fox head, roaring a silent challenge at the heavens. You want to play with big guns? Naruto's voice, now merged with Kurama's, echoed in the minds of everyone present. Let's play. He opened his mouth, and the fox head avatar did the same. A dense, swirling sphere of pure positive and negative chakra, a perfect balance of unimaginable power, formed in an instant. A tailed beast bomb. It was smaller than the ones he had used in the war, but it was still a weapon of godlike destruction. Its energy signature was so alien, so overwhelmingly powerful, that Gojo's 6 eyes couldn't even look at it directly. It felt like it could erase the very concept of cursed energy from existence. Naruto fired. The small, dense sphere of apocalyptic power shot upward, meeting the cosmic beam halfway. The collision was utterly silent. There was no sound, no shockwave, no explosion. There was only a flash of pure, absolute white light that consumed everything. The pocket of reality-bending chaos, the Star Eater's techniques, the cosmic beam, the tear in the sky, it was all unwritten. Wiped clean. When the light faded, the sky was a normal blue again. The ground was scorched. The dozen Star Eaters lay unconscious or dead. The only one left standing was their lieutenant, his staff shattered, his body smoking, staring in abject terror. This is impossible, he stammered. The Sun Beacon was supposed to be our dawn, not our doom. Before he could say more, he collapsed, defeated. The training ground was silent, save for the wind. Gojo let out a long, slow breath, lowering his hands. He looked at Naruto, who was breathing a little heavily, the crimson chakra cloak receding back into his body. The sheer, raw power he had just witnessed was on a scale that dwarfed anything he had ever seen. Hollow purple was a precision tool of erasure. That was a tool of Armageddon. A newfound, profound respect settled in Gojo's gut. This wasn't just a rival. This wasn't just an interesting anomaly. This was an entity on the same level as a fully realized Sukuna, or maybe, even beyond. Okay, Gojo said, his voice quiet, devoid of its usual arrogance. I get it now. He looked at the devastation around them, then back at Naruto. I think you might be the only one who can actually change this cursed world. A door slid open, and Maki ran out onto the grounds, playful cloud in hand, her face a mask of worry. She had felt the colossal spike of energy, the violent warping of space, and had come as soon as she could break away. She saw the unconscious bodies, the scorched earth, and the two figures standing in the center of it all. Her eyes found Naruto's. Are you okay? She asked, her voice sharp with concern. Naruto looked at her, then at Gojo, then at the defeated enemies. A strange feeling settled over him. The exhaustion of a desperate fight, the adrenaline, the camaraderie of fighting back-to-back with a powerful ally against an incomprehensible foe. He felt a small, genuine smile form on his face, the first truly relaxed one since he'd arrived. Yeah, he said, and he was surprised to find that he meant it. I am. This felt more like home than anything else yet. For the first time in a strange, wrong world, he had found a battle he understood. And in that, he found a sliver of peace. Chapter 5, A Cage of Vipers. The summons arrived not as a polite request, but as a proclamation. It was a formal, lacquered scroll delivered by a grim-faced member of the Zenin clan's Kukuri unit, the elite squad of non-sorcerers trained in assassination and enforcement. The scroll bore the seal of Naruto Zenin, the clan head, and its message was cold and absolute. Maki Zenin was to present herself at the main Zenin estate in Kyoto within 3 days. The stated reason was to formally account for her unsanctioned actions during the Goodwill event and to have her future station within the clan reassessed. Everyone who read it knew what it really was. It was a trap. They were gathered in one of the common rooms at Jujutsu High, Maki, Naruto, Megumi, Nobara, Panda, and Toge. Gojo leaned against a wall, observing with a detached amusement that didn't quite reach his eyes. Maki held the scroll, her knuckles white. Her face was a stone mask, but inside, a familiar, bitter storm was raging. This was her family's way. They wouldn't challenge her directly, not after she had proven her strength. Instead, they would drag her back into the nest of vipers, to break her spirit with social pressure, humiliation, and the suffocating weight of tradition. They wanted to remind her that no matter how strong she became, she was still, in their eyes, a defect. A possession. You can't go, Nobara said, her voice sharp with anger. It's obvious what they're planning. They'll lock you up or worse. It's not a request, Maki said, her voice tight. It's a command. If I refuse, I'll be branded a deserter. They'll have grounds to hunt me down as a traitor to the clan. It gives them the justification they need. Megumi, who knew the Zenin's cruelty better than most, looked grim. She's right. Naruto doesn't make idle threats. Refusing the summons is a declaration of war. So we give them one. Nobara slammed her fist on the table. It's not that simple, Maki shot back, frustration lacing her words. This isn't a curse we can just exorcise. This is about politics, about laws that have been in place for 1,000 years. It's their home turf. Their rules. Naruto had been silent throughout the debate, his gaze fixed on the scroll in Maki's hand. He could feel the venom coiled within the polite, formal language. It was the same veiled threat he had seen from nobles and councils his entire life. The tool of the powerful who were too cowardly for a direct confrontation. He finally spoke, his voice cutting through the argument. When are you supposed to leave? Maki looked at him, surprised by his calm, practical tone. Day after tomorrow. All right, Naruto said, standing up. I'll need to pack a few things. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at him. What are you talking about? Maki asked, her brow furrowed. This is my problem. A Zenin clan problem. You can't just. I'm going with you, Naruto stated, not as a suggestion, but as a simple fact. He met her gaze, his blue eyes clear and resolute. You said it yourself. It's their home turf, their rules. So we're not going to play their game. Gojo let out a low whistle from his corner. Oh, I like this. Crashing the stuffiest, most dangerous party in the Jujutsu world. An uninvited guest with the power of a god. The old men are going to have aneurysms. They won't let you in, Maki protested, though a strange, unfamiliar flicker of hope was kindling in her chest. You're not a member of the clan. You have no standing. I don't need standing, Naruto replied with a confidence that was utterly unshakable. He walked over to her and gently took the scroll from her hands, rolling it back up. I'm your personal guard. A concerned colleague ensuring your safety during a reassessment. They can't very well refuse entry to your protector without admitting their hostile intentions, can they? He was flipping their script. Using their own rigid etiquette and obsession with appearances against them. It was brilliant. It was insane. They'll try to kill you, Megumi warned, his voice grave. The Kukuru unit on their own ground, they're not to be underestimated. Naruto just smiled, a small, dangerous smile. Let them try. The Zenin estate was less a home and more a fortress. Sprawling across a vast, secluded valley outside Kyoto, it was a labyrinth of ancient wooden halls, meticulously manicured gardens, and oppressive, centuries-old cursed energy. The very air was heavy with pride and cruelty. When Maki and Naruto arrived at the main gate, they were met by a line of Kukuru unit guards, their faces hidden behind identical masks, their hands resting on the hilts of their cursed tools. Leading them was Junichi Zenin, one of the clan's senior members, a man with a severe face and eyes that held a deep, simmering resentment for Maki's very existence. Maki, Junichi said, his voice devoid of warmth. You have come. And you have brought, an outsider. His eyes flicked to Naruto, dismissing him as an irrelevance. Naruto Uzumaki, Naruto introduced himself, stepping slightly forward. I'm serving as Maki's escort. Just making sure everything stays civil. Junichi's eyes narrowed. You have no place here. The affairs of the Zenin clan are our own. Leave now. I don't think so, Naruto replied, his tone still pleasant, but with an undercurrent of unyielding steel. Maki is a student of Jujutsu High, and a valuable asset. Her well-being is a matter of concern to the school. As her teammate, I'm just here to observe. Unless, of course, you have something to hide. The accusation hung in the air, a perfect little trap. The guards tensed. Junichi's face hardened. He was caught. To refuse Naruto entry now would be a tacit admission that the summons was issued in bad faith. It would be a political incident, and Gojo Satoru would have a field day with it. Very well, Junichi spat, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Let him in. But he is to be confined to the guest quarters. He will not interfere. Of course, Naruto said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Wouldn't dream of it. As they were led through the sprawling compound, Naruto's sage mode senses were on high alert. He was mapping the entire estate. He could feel the hidden passages, the arrays of cursed tools in the armories, the dozens of assassins lurking in the shadows of the eaves, their killing intent a low, constant hum. He could feel the powerful, arrogant signatures of the clan's elite, Naobito, Oji, Naoya. And beneath it all, he felt something else. A deep, ancient wrongness. A cold, dormant power buried deep beneath the foundations of the main hall. It felt familiar. Like a fainter, sleeping version of the cosmic horror the Star Eaters worshipped. Maki walked beside him, her back ramrod straight, her face a mask of practiced indifference. But he could feel the tension in her, the way her muscles were coiled tight, the way her breathing was shallow. This place was a psychological torture chamber for her, and she was walking willingly into its depths. Their first test came that night. Naruto was in his guest room, a stark, simple space with paper walls. He sat in the center of the room, meditating. He felt them coming before they had even left their barracks. 10 members of the Kakura unit, moving with absolute silence, surrounding his room. They were masters of stealth, their presence almost completely suppressed. Almost. To Naruto's senses, they were screaming their intent. The paper doors slid open on all 4 sides simultaneously. 10 assassins, armed with blades coated in potent poisons, lunged at once. It was a perfect, inescapable attack, designed to kill a sorcerer before they could even form a hand seal. Naruto didn't move from his seated position. His eyes snapped open. A wave of pure, unadulterated killing intent, honed in a war against gods and monsters, flooded the room. It wasn't chakra. It wasn't cursed energy. It was the raw, primal pressure of a superior predator. The 10 assassins froze mid-lunge, their bodies paralyzed. Their training, their discipline, their poisoned blades, all useless. Their instincts, their deepest, most primitive lizard brains, were screaming at them that they had just tried to pounce on a sleeping dragon. Their minds were flooded with images of blood and death, of a 9-tailed demon fox, of a power so vast and terrible it defied comprehension. One of them dropped his sword with a clatter that echoed in the sudden, terrifying silence. Naruto slowly stood up. He walked over to the man who had dropped his blade, picked it up, and examined the poison on its edge. "This is sloppy," he said, his voice quiet. He looked at the paralyzed assassins, whose faces were pale with sweat under their masks. "You rely on your tools and your numbers, but you have no real conviction. You're just following orders. There's no fire in you." He tossed the sword, embedding it an inch deep into the wooden floor at their feet. "Go back and tell your master," he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper, "that if he sends his dogs after me again, I won't be so gentle." He turned his back on them and sat back down to meditate. The wave of killing intent vanished as quickly as it had come. For a long moment, the assassins didn't move. Then, as one, they scrambled out of the room, tripping over each other in their haste to escape. The silent, elite killers of the Zenin clan had been broken without a single punch thrown. The formal dinner was an exercise in psychological warfare. Naruto and Maki were seated at a long, low table in the main hall. Across from them sat the clan's ruling triumvirate, Naobito, the aging, perpetually drunk clan head, Oji, Maki's father, a man whose face was a permanent sneer of disappointment, and Naoya, who looked at Naruto with a mixture of seething hatred and newfound fear. The conversation was a minefield of veiled insults and passive-aggressive jabs, all aimed at Maki. They talked about her failures, her weakness, her disgraceful decision to leave the clan. They treated her not as a person, but as a failed investment they were considering liquidating. Maki endured it all with a stoic silence, her hands clenched into fists in her lap, her jaw tight. Naruto ate his meal, listening patiently. He didn't interrupt. He let them spin their web of cruelty, let them reveal the depths of their own ugliness. The breaking point came when Oji, his voice dripping with paternal disappointment, looked at his daughter. "You could have had a comfortable life. Married off to some minor clan, bearing children with actual techniques. But you chose this, embarrassing spectacle. You have shamed me. You have shamed us all." Maki flinched as if struck. The barb, coming from her own father, hit its mark. Naruto slowly placed his chopsticks down. The small, sharp sound cut through the room. A sliver of Kurama's chakra, cold and red and full of ancient malice, leaked into the room. It wasn't an explosion of power, but a slow, suffocating bleed of pressure. The candles flickered. The air grew thick and heavy, like the moments before a thunderstorm. Naobito, Naoya, and Oji all froze, their eyes wide. They felt it. A terrifying, demonic presence that made the cursed energy in their own bodies feel frail and insignificant. It was coming from the blonde boy, who was now looking directly at Oji, his blue eyes no longer calm, but burning with a cold fire. You talk about shame. Naruto's voice was dangerously quiet. Let me tell you about being an outcast. He began to speak. He told them of a boy hated by his entire village for a power he didn't ask for. A boy with no family, no friends, ostracized and alone. He spoke of the loneliness, the pain, the struggle to be seen as a person, not a monster. He painted a vivid picture of a child sitting on a swing, watching other children play, his heart aching with a desire to belong. Then, his tone shifted. He spoke of how that boy refused to break. How he trained until his body gave out, how he fought for the respect of those who hated him, how he forged bonds with his comrades and his teachers. How he turned the source of his shame into his greatest strength, and how he used that strength to protect the very people who had once scorned him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't boast. He just told his story. And as he spoke, he reframed Maki's narrative. Her lack of cursed energy wasn't a defect, it was a challenge she had risen to meet with her own strength. Her struggle wasn't a source of shame, it was a mark of her incredible, unbreakable will. Her leaving the clan wasn't an act of rebellion, it was an act of liberation. You see her as a failure because she isn't like you, Naruto finished, his gaze sweeping over the three stunned men. But the truth is, you're not worthy of her. She has more strength, more honor, and more fire in her little finger than the three of you have in your entire clan. You haven't been shamed by her. You should be proud of her. But you're too weak and too blind to see it. The killing intent vanished. The pressure lifted. The room was deathly silent. Oji was trembling with rage, his face purple. Naoya looked utterly cowed. Naobito, for the first time, looked at Naruto not as an inconvenience, but as a truly terrifying entity. This boy hadn't just threatened them. He had judged them. He had dissected their entire worldview and found it wanting. Maki was staring at Naruto, her eyes wide, glistening with unshed tears. No one had ever defended her like that. He had taken her greatest shame and held it up to the light, revealing it to be her greatest source of pride. He hadn't just stood up for her, he had validated her entire existence. Naobito slammed his gourd of sake on the table, breaking the silence. Enough. This farce is over. His drunken eyes burned with a cold fury. Tomorrow. At dawn. The dojo. Oji, you will put your daughter back in her place. You will break her, and show this whelp the true meaning of Zenin power. Oji stood up, his face a mask of hate. It will be my pleasure. The dojo was a vast, open-air platform of dark wood, polished to a mirror shine. The entire clan had gathered to watch. This was to be a ritual humiliation. Oji Zenin, a master of the blade and a powerful sorcerer, against his defective daughter. Oji stood at one end, holding a katana that hummed with cursed energy. Maki stood at the other, clad in a simple training gi, holding her spear. Naruto stood on the sidelines, next to a smirking Naoya. She doesn't stand a chance, Naoya whispered, his confidence returning on his home turf. Father will end this in a single blow. I wouldn't be so sure, Naruto said calmly. Oji. He called out, his voice carrying across the dojo. A proposition. Oji glared at him. The boy speaks out of turn again. A match like this should have stakes, don't you think? Naruto continued, ignoring him. How about this? If you win, Maki returns to the clan, accepts her station, and I leave and never return. But, if she wins. He paused, letting the words hang in the air, she is to be named the next head of the Zenin clan. The crowd gasped. Naoya choked. Naobito and Oji stared in stunned disbelief. The sheer, unmitigated audacity of the proposal was breathtaking. Oji started to laugh, a harsh, ugly sound. You're insane. She could never. What's the matter? Naruto taunted, a sharp grin on his face. Are you afraid? Afraid you might lose to your defective daughter in front of everyone? He had backed Oji into a corner. To refuse now would be to admit the possibility of his own defeat. His pride, the cornerstone of his entire being, would not allow it. Fine. Oji snarled, his eyes wild with rage. I accept your ridiculous terms. I will enjoy breaking her, and then I will enjoy watching you crawl away from here in shame. Excellent, Naruto said. He walked onto the platform, stopping in front of Maki. The crowd watched, confused. What are you doing? Maki whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Name me the head of the clan. Are you crazy? I can't beat him. He's... Yes, you can, Naruto said, his voice soft but firm. He looked her right in the eyes. Your body is stronger than his. Your technique is more refined. The only thing he has over you is his cursed energy, and the way it reinforces his body and his blade. He raised his hand and gently placed his palm on her forehead. So, let's even the playing field. Maki flinched, expecting a jolt of power, an infusion of his chakra. Instead, she felt nothing. A strange, quiet neutrality spread through her. I haven't given you anything, Naruto explained, his voice low, for her ears only. Your heavenly restriction makes you a physical prodigy because you have zero cursed energy. It's a trade-off. But the world is saturated with cursed energy, and it puts a constant, subtle pressure on you. A resistance. It's like you're walking underwater your entire life. All I've done is create a small seal, a bubble around you that perfectly nullifies that ambient pressure. For the first time, you're not walking underwater anymore. He took his hand away. You're free. Show him what you can really do. He walked off the platform, leaving a stunned Maki standing in the center of the dojo. She took a breath. And another. The air felt lighter. Her limbs felt impossibly fast. The world seemed to be moving in slow motion. The subtle, lifelong leash she had never even known was there, was gone. Begin. Nabito roared. Oji charged, his katana a blur of cursed energy, aiming a killing blow straight at his daughter's heart. This ends now, you disgrace. Maki moved. She wasn't just fast. She was like lightning. She took a single side step, and Oji's blade, which should have been impossible to dodge, slashed through empty air. He stumbled, his momentum carrying him forward, his eyes wide with shock at her impossible speed. She didn't give him time to recover. She spun, the butt of her spear connecting with the back of his knee with a sickening crunch. Oji screamed, his leg buckling. He had never been hit like this. It wasn't just a strong blow, it felt like he had been struck by a falling building. Maki didn't hesitate. Her movements were a brutal, beautiful, cathartic dance of violence. She was faster, stronger, and more precise. Her spear was everywhere at once, disarming him, breaking his stance, landing punishing blows to his joints and ribs. Every strike was filled with years of repressed anger, frustration, and pain. Oji, the proud master, was being utterly, hopelessly dismantled. He tried to use his curse techniques, but she was too fast, too close, giving him no room to breathe. His cursed energy reinforcements were useless against the sheer, overwhelming physical force she was now capable of unleashing. The crowd was silent, their faces a mixture of horror and awe. Naoya's smirk had long since vanished, replaced by a pale, slack-jawed disbelief. The fight ended with Oji on his knees, disarmed, bruised, and broken. Maki stood over him, the point of her spear leveled at his throat. She was breathing heavily, her body screaming with effort, but her eyes were clear and bright. She had done it. She had won. She looked up, her gaze finding Naruto in the crowd. He wasn't cheering. He was just watching her, a quiet, profound pride in his eyes. He had been the catalyst, but this victory, this moment of absolute, world-shattering triumph, was hers and hers alone. She had just defeated her father and, by their own terms, won the right to rule the clan that had scorned her. The cage of vipers had a new master. Deep beneath the dojo, in the hidden, ancient shrine, the dormant, negative energy stirred, agitated by the violent, revolutionary shift in power above. The forgotten duty of the Zenin clan, their role as jailers, was about to come back to haunt them all. Chapter 6, The Culling Ritual begins. The fallout from Maki's victory was a political earthquake that cracked the very foundations of the Jujutsu world. The Zenin clan, a pillar of conservatism and tradition for a millennium, was in chaos. Naobito, bound by his pride and the word he had given before 100 witnesses, could not renege on the terms. Oji was disgraced, his authority shattered. Naoya was a ghost, his arrogance replaced by a venomous, simmering silence. Maki Zenin, the outcast, the defect, the family's shame, was now officially the heir apparent. But she didn't stay to claim her throne. Not yet. After her victory, she and Naruto left the Zenin estate, leaving the vipers to writhe in their self-made pit. Their departure was as shocking as their arrival. They had walked into the heart of the enemy's fortress, dismantled its power structure, and walked out, leaving a revolution in their wake. The news spread like wildfire. For the first time, the younger generation of sorcerers saw that the old guard was not invincible. The rigid hierarchy was not absolute. Change, violent and revolutionary, was possible. Naruto Uzumaki's name was no longer just a whisper associated with Gojo Satoru, it was a symbol. He was the man who had stood beside the outcast and crowned her a queen. And in the shadows, Kenjaku watched, and he smiled. The chaos was perfect. The old order was destabilized, the sorcerers were divided, their attention focused on the internal politics of the Zenin clan. The world was looking the wrong way. It was time. He stood on the observation deck of the Tokyo Skytree, looking down at the sprawling metropolis. In his hand, he held a small, grotesque object, a finger, blackened and gnarled, but not Sukuna's. It was a relic, one of dozens he had collected over centuries, each one imbued with the vow of a long-dead sorcerer, a pact to be reborn and fight again. The age of clans and stagnation is over, Kenjaku whispered to the wind, his stitched smile stretching wide. But the new age will not be theirs. It will be mine. He raised his hand. Idle transfiguration, he commanded, his own curse technique flowing into the network of cursed objects he had spent a lifetime preparing. And then, he spoke the trigger word, a remote activation for his grand design. Unleash. All across Japan, it began. It wasn't a game. It wasn't an invitation. It was an activation. In Shibuya, a salaryman on his way home from work suddenly screamed, his body convulsing as a dormant cursed object surgically implanted in him generations ago by Kenjaku activated, transforming him into a vessel for an ancient, bloodthirsty sorcerer. In Sapporo, a high school girl's latent curse technique was forcibly awakened, a barrier instantly erupting around her school, trapping everyone inside. In Fukuoka, a sealed cursed womb in a subway station tore open, flooding the tunnels with grotesque curses. Dozens of colonies, massive cylindrical barriers of black, impenetrable energy, erupted from the ground in major population centers. Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, Nagoya, all were fractured. These were not the controlled barriers of the Goodwill event. They were prisons, designed to trap millions of ordinary humans inside with newly awakened sorcerers and hordes of cursed spirits. The goal was not a battle royale. It was a harvest. A grand, nationwide ritual to generate a tidal wave of negative emotion, fear, despair, hatred, pain, on a scale never before seen. It was a feast, laid out to attract a slumbering, cosmic god. The Jujutsu world was plunged into utter pandemonium. The monitoring systems at both schools lit up like a Christmas tree from hell. The higher UPS, sequestered in their chambers, were paralyzed. Their rigid command structure was designed for singular, localized threats. They had no protocol for a simultaneous, nationwide assault. They issued contradictory orders, their authority dissolving into panicked squabbling. Gojo Satoru was a blur of motion. He was the strongest, but even he could not be everywhere at once. He zipped from one crisis to the next, collapsing a newly formed barrier in Osaka, obliterating a swarm of special grades in Yokohama, but for every fire he put out, 5 more ignited. He was a one-man army fighting a war on 100 fronts, and he was being deliberately stretched thin. This was Kenjaku's strategy: neutralize the strongest not by fighting him, but by making him too busy to interfere with the main event. In the midst of this collapsing world, Naruto stood on a rooftop at Jujutsu High, his sage mode active. He wasn't looking at any one place. He was feeling. His senses, expanded and refined, were spread across the entire country. He felt the sudden, violent blooms of cursed energy, the screams of terror from millions of trapped civilians, the desperate, failing efforts of scattered sorcerers. It was a symphony of chaos and despair. Maki stood beside him, her spear in hand, her face grim. She could see the black columns of the colonies rising over Tokyo in the distance. What is this? What's happening? A coordinated attack, Naruto said, his voice low and serious. They're not trying to win. They're trying to create chaos. To farm it. We need orders, Maki said, a lifetime of training kicking in. Gojo-sensei is out there, but the school, the higher UPS, they're silent. They're not silent, Naruto replied, his golden eyes distant. They're drowning. Their system has broken. There are no orders coming. He looked at the chaos, the fear, the sheer scale of the disaster. He saw the faces of the people he had sworn to protect in his own world, reflected in the suffering of this one. He had been a genin, a chunin, a jonin, a hokage. He knew every level of command, and he knew what happened when leadership failed. The soldiers on the ground died. He closed his eyes for a single, long moment. He felt Kurama's vast consciousness stir within him, not with grogginess, but with a grim, shared understanding. They need a leader, Kit. Whether you want the title or not. Naruto opened his eyes. The weariness was gone, replaced by the sharp, decisive clarity of a wartime commander. Then we'll make our own, he said. He brought his hands together in the familiar cross-shaped seal. Mass Shadow Clone Jutsu. In a series of explosive puffs of smoke that covered the entire grounds of Jujutsu High, 1,000 Naruto Uzumakis appeared. They were not a disorganized mob. They stood in disciplined ranks, each one with the same determined expression as the original. The students and faculty who had gathered outside in a panicked mob stared in utter disbelief. They had seen him make a dozen clones. They had never conceived of this. It was an army, created in an instant. All right, listen up. Naruto's voice boomed, amplified by his chakra. It cut through the panicked chatter, commanding immediate attention. He began issuing orders with a speed and clarity that was dizzying. He pointed a clone to a group of sorcerers with communication techniques. You're my new intel division. Get every sorcerer in the country on the same channel. I want a real-time map of every barrier, every major threat. Go. You 500, another clone commanded, pointing to half the army. You're our first responders. You are not to engage high-grade threats. Your mission is search and rescue. Get civilians out of the hot zones. Prioritize the injured. Each of you has my healing abilities. Use them. Go. You 100, a third clone declared, gesturing to another group. You are our new logistics network. Find every cursed tool cache, every medical supply depot. We will need everything. Create supply lines. Move. The clones dispersed, moving with a singular purpose, a whirlwind of orange and black that was bringing order to the chaos. They were a communications network, a rescue corps, a logistics division, and an army all in one. In the space of 5 minutes, Naruto had created a more effective response organization than the entire Jujutsu establishment had managed in 100 years. The remaining students, Megumi, Nobara, Tadu, the Kyoto group, and others who had gathered, looked on, their panic replaced by a stunned awe. Naruto, the original, walked to the front of the remaining crowd. He stood before them, not as an anomaly or a guest, but as the only point of stability in a world that was falling apart. "There are no more schools," he declared, his voice ringing with absolute authority. "There are no more clans. Not today. Today, there is only one front in a war you didn't know you were fighting. The enemy wants you to be scared. They want you to be divided. They want you to hide behind your traditions and your rivalries until you are picked off one by one." He looked over the faces before him. He saw fear, but he also saw a glimmer of hope. A desperate need for someone to follow. "I will not let that happen," he said. "I've seen this before. I've seen a world on the brink of destruction, saved by people who were brave enough to stand together. You are all brave. You are all strong. But you lack a banner to unite under." He took a deep breath. He hadn't sought this. He hadn't wanted this crown. But the world had placed it at his feet, and to refuse it now would be to condemn everyone. The old system is broken. The higher UPS have failed you. Gojo Satoru cannot be everywhere at once. So a new system must be born. From this moment forward, you do not answer to your clans or your teachers. You answer to me. His voice dropped, losing its commanding tone and becoming something more personal, a plea and a promise. I don't know all your rules. I don't care about your ancient bloodlines. All I care about is getting as many of us through this as possible. I will lead you. I will fight with you. And I will protect you with my life. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. They call me an anomaly. A paradox. The higher-ups wanted to name me a curse. The fanatics call me a beacon. So be it. You need a leader. A king to rally to in a time of war. His gaze hardened, filled with the weight of 100 battles and the unshakable will of a man who had stared down gods. So that is what I will be. I am Naruto Uzumaki. And until this crisis is over, I am your Sorcerer King. There was no ceremony. There was no coronation. There was only a profound, stunned silence, followed by a groundswell of assent. Aoi Tadu was the first. He slammed his fist over his heart, tears streaming down his face. My king. My besto friendo. Kyuzukabe, the jaded, pragmatic teacher, gave a short, sharp nod, a look of grudging, profound respect on his face. He had seen enough. He knew leadership when he saw it. Then, one by one, the others followed. The Kyoto students, who had been raised to see Tokyo as their rivals, bent their heads in acknowledgement. Nobara and Megumi looked at Naruto, their friend, and saw something more, a leader they would follow into hell. Maki stepped forward to stand beside him. She did not bow. She did not kneel. She raised her spear and slammed its butt onto the ground, a warrior queen pledging her spear to her king. Her expression was fierce, proud, and unwavering. He had stood by her in her fight. She would stand by him in his. His coronation was not one of divine right or inherited power. It was forged in the heat of a crisis, born of necessity, and sealed by the trust of those who had seen his strength and his heart. The age of petty squabbles was over. The age of the Sorcerer King had just begun, not with a whisper, but with the roar of a world on fire. In his dark room, Kenjaku watched it all unfold on his monitors. He saw the army of shadow clones bringing order to his chaos. He saw the declaration. He saw the pledge of allegiance from the best and brightest of the new generation. He wasn't angry. He was ecstatic. Sorcerer King, he mused, a slow, delighted chuckle bubbling in his chest. How wonderfully dramatic. He thinks he is uniting them against me. He zoomed in on a map of Japan, now dotted with the red icons of his active culling rituals. The lines of negative energy were flowing, converging, creating a massive, countrywide transmutation circle. But there was a new element now. The actions of Naruto's clones, rescuing civilians, giving them hope, healing their injuries, were creating pockets of powerful positive energy. Hope. Relief. Gratitude. These emotions were just as potent as fear and despair. Normally, this would counteract his ritual. But Naruto's energy was different. It was so potent, so alien to this world, it wasn't neutralizing the negative energy. It was acting as a catalyst of a different sort. "He is a king of hope," Kenjaku whispered, his ancient eyes gleaming with understanding. "And the Star Eaters believe he is their sun beacon. They see him as the great opposition to their god of the void." The nascent consciousness of Amatsu no Kagashio, the Star Eater, was an entity of absolute nothingness. It was drawn to great concentrations of energy, negative or positive, like a moth to a flame, so it could consume them and return them to the beautiful silence of the void. Kenjaku was creating a feast of negative energy to lure it. But Naruto, in his attempt to save everyone, was creating a beacon of positive energy that was 1,000 times brighter. "He's not stopping my ritual," Kenjaku realized, his laughter growing louder, bordering on hysteria. "He's accelerating it beyond my wildest dreams. He's ringing the dinner bell for a hungry god." The Sorcerer King thought he was saving his kingdom. In reality, he was painting a giant target on it for an entity that devoured stars. The game had just become so much more interesting. Chapter 7, The King's First Gambit. The war room was not a room at all, but the largest lecture hall at Jujutsu High, its tiered seating now filled with a motley collection of sorcerers who, a week ago, would have sooner fought each other than sat together. Kyoto students conferred in hushed tones with their Tokyo counterparts. A handful of grizzled, freelance sorcerers like Kusakabe shared notes with clan members who had defied their elders to answer the call. At the front of the hall, a massive, hand-drawn map of Japan was pinned to the wall, brought to life by dozens of Naruto's clones who moved small, marked stones across it, updating troop movements and threat assessments in real time. This was the nerve center of the new world. Naruto stood before the map, his back to the assembly. He wasn't wearing his tracksuit anymore. At Maki's insistence, he now wore a customized version of the Jujutsu High uniform, simple black pants and a high-collared jacket, but his was unique. It was unadorned, save for a deep crimson swirl stitched onto the back, the symbol of his lost home, a quiet memorial and a public declaration of his identity. He had not slept in 3 days. Clones could handle the physical exhaustion, but the mental strain of processing a nation's worth of information, of commanding 1,000 moving parts in a desperate, sprawling war, was immense. Yet, his posture was straight, his focus absolute. "Report," he said, his voice calm and clear, cutting through the low hum of the room. A clone standing by the map spoke. "King's Legion Alpha, led by Tadu, has successfully collapsed the barrier in Sendai. Civilian casualties were minimal. They're en route to their next target." Another clone pointed to a different section of the map. "King's Legion Beta, led by Fushiguro and Kujisaki, is meeting heavy resistance in Nagoya. A reincarnated sorcerer from the Heian era is leading the curses. They're holding their ground but require support." "And the Legion spearhead?" Naruto asked, his eyes finding Maki, who stood near the front row, her arms crossed, her new cursed tool resting on her shoulder. She had refused to take a command position that would keep her in the war room. She was a warrior, and her place was on the front lines. Naruto had created an elite, fast-moving strike force for her, King's Legion Spearhead, tasked with the most difficult missions, punching holes in enemy defenses and assassinating high-value targets. To that end, he had spent a night with her in the school's forge. He didn't know the intricacies of forging cursed tools, but he knew energy. With his chakra, he had superheated the forge to temperatures no normal fire could reach, and guided by Maki's expert knowledge, they had folded a unique metal, a byproduct from the clash between his tailed beast bomb and the Star Eater's cosmic energy, into her existing weapons. Her spear and blades were now lighter, stronger, and unnaturally sharp, humming with a strange, residual energy that was neither cursed nor truly positive. They were tools forged from a paradox, just like their wielder. Spear had successfully destroyed the cursed womb supplying the Shinjuku colony, Maki reported, her voice ringing with crisp efficiency. The barrier is destabilizing. We're ready for our next assignment. Naruto nodded, turning back to the map. His strategy was simple and brutal, systematic decapitation. He wasn't trying to clear every curse from every colony. That would take years. Instead, he was targeting the pillars holding the culling ritual together, the powerful reincarnated sorcerers, the cursed wombs that spawned reinforcements, and the barrier stones themselves. It was a strategy of focused, overwhelming force. But now, they faced a choice. A clone moved two large, red stones onto the map, one over the city of Kobe, the other over Hiroshima. New intel, the clone announced, his tone grim. The Star Eaters have made their move. They're not creating their own barriers. They're hijacking Kenjakus. They've taken control of the colonies in Kobe and Hiroshima. The room murmured with confusion. Kyusuke voiced the question on everyone's mind. Hijacked? Why would they do that? I thought they were after you. They are, Naruto said, turning to face them. But they're fanatics. Their goal isn't just to kill me, it's to summon their god. Kenjaku's ritual is designed to harvest negative energy. The Star Eaters have found a way to amplify it. Another clone projected an image onto the wall, a live feed from a recon clone near Kobe. It showed the inside of the barrier. The Star Eaters weren't just letting curses run rampant. They were conducting a ritual slaughter, systematically executing the trapped civilians and channeling the resulting surge of terror and death into the barrier itself, making it glow with a sickly, purple light. They're turning the colonies into sacrificial altars, Naruto explained, his voice hard as stone. They're using the lives of the people inside to create a massive spike of negative energy, a feast, to lure their god, just as I suspected. He pointed to the two red stones on the map. Both cities are critical. Both barriers are being charged at an exponential rate. Our intelligence suggests that in less than 12 hours, they will reach critical mass. We don't know what happens then, but we can assume it's apocalyptic. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of his new forged army. Here is the problem. We only have the resources to launch one major offensive right now. Legion Alpha is exhausted. Beta is tied down. The only force we have that is fast enough and strong enough to intervene in time is the spearhead. He looked at Maki. You can only be in one place, Maki. The grim reality of his words settled over the room like a shroud. He could only send his best team to one city. They had to choose. They had to choose who lived and who died. Hiroshima has a larger population, a Kyoto student offered, his voice hesitant. Logically, we should save more lives. But the energy signature from Kobe is stronger, Megumi countered, his face pale. The Star Eaters' leadership seems to be concentrated there. Taking them out might be a more significant strategic blow. It could disrupt their operations nationwide. The room devolved into a tense debate. Save the most people, or strike the head of the snake. It was a classic trolley problem, but the trolley was a wave of cosmic horror, and the tracks were laid over two cities of screaming people. Naruto listened, his expression unreadable. He let them argue, let them feel the impossible weight of the decision. This was the burden of command, and he needed them all to understand it. Finally, he raised a hand. The room fell silent. He walked to the map and looked at the two red stones. Kobe. Hiroshima. Hundreds of thousands of lives hanging in the balance, waiting on his word. The old Naruto, the boy who had sworn to save everyone, would have tried to find a third option, a way to save both. He would have created 1,000 more clones, run himself into the ground, believed in a miracle. But he was not that boy anymore. He was a Hokage who had sent men to their deaths. He was a king fighting a war. Miracles were in short supply. He made his choice. Spearhead will go to Kobe, he declared. His voice was quiet, but it held the finality of a judge's sentence. A wave of shock and protest rippled through the room. But Hiroshima, someone started. Kobe is the command center, Naruto cut them off, his voice hardening, leaving no room for argument. It's where the Star Eater lieutenants are. It's the brain. If we cut off the head, the rest of the body will falter. It's a gamble, but it's the only move that gives us a long-term advantage. He turned from the map, and for a second, the iron mask of the commander slipped. They saw the immense, crushing weight of his decision in his eyes. The people in Hiroshima. He began, his voice rough with an emotion he quickly suppressed. Will be a sacrifice. A terrible, necessary sacrifice to prevent a greater loss of life tomorrow. Their deaths will buy us the time we need to win this war. We will not forget them. We will not let their sacrifice be in vain. But we cannot save them. The room was utterly silent. No one could meet his eyes. They had debated it as a strategy, but he had made it real. He had shouldered the burden of the executioner. He had made the cold, pragmatic choice of a king, placing the survival of the kingdom over the lives of some of its subjects. Maki watched him, her heart aching. She saw the cost of his crown. She saw the boy who wanted to save everyone, being forced to become the man who couldn't. The meeting was dismissed. The sorcerers filed out, their faces grim, the reality of the war now a cold, hard stone in their guts. Soon, only Naruto and Maki were left in the vast, empty hall. He stood with his back to her, still staring at the map, at the red stone over Hiroshima. He hadn't moved. She walked up behind him. She didn't say anything. She didn't offer words of comfort or justification. They would be hollow. Instead, she reached out and squeezed his arm, her grip firm, a silent transference of strength. A silent acknowledgement of his burden. He flinched at her touch, a barely perceptible tremor. He took a deep, shuddering breath. I just condemned thousands of people to death, Maki, he whispered, his voice raw and vulnerable, the king disappearing for a moment, leaving only the man. With a single sentence. You saved millions, she replied, her voice just as quiet, her grip tightening. By making the choice no one else could. He turned to face her, and his eyes were filled with a profound, terrifying weariness. And what if I was wrong? What if I'm just leading everyone to a different kind of slaughter? I'm a stranger in this world, Maki. I'm making it up as I go. What if I lose my way under all this? He gestured vaguely at the map, at the crown she couldn't see but they both could feel. She looked at him, at this impossible man who held the weight of the world on his shoulders, and her heart was filled with a fierce, protective certainty. She had spent her life fighting to be seen, to be acknowledged. He had been the first to see her, truly see her. Now, it was her turn to see him. She reached up with her free hand and cupped his cheek, her calloused fingers surprisingly gentle against his skin. His eyes widened slightly at the contact. Then I'll be there to keep you straight, she said, her voice soft, but her words were an unbreakable vow. You feel like you're losing your way, you look at me. You think you're making the wrong choice, you talk to me. I'll be your anchor, Naruto. I'll be your conscience. And I'll be your spear. She leaned in and pressed her lips to his. It wasn't a soft, gentle kiss. It was a kiss of desperation and affirmation, of shared burdens and fierce loyalty. It was a promise made in the heart of a war room, surrounded by the ghosts of the dead and the fear of the future. It tasted of sweat and ozone and the metallic tang of unshed blood. It was a confirmation of life in the face of so much death. When she pulled back, their foreheads were resting against each other. The weariness in his eyes hadn't vanished, but it was now met with a flicker of renewed strength. A flicker of hope. He had shouldered the burden, but he was no longer carrying it alone. "Kobe," she whispered, her voice regaining its warrior's edge. "What's the plan?" He closed his eyes for a moment, steadying himself, the commander returning. "The Star Eater lieutenants are channeling the ritual from the roof of the Kobe port tower. You and Spearhead will be our insertion team. My clones will create a massive diversion on the east side of the colony, drawing the main curse force away. It will give you a window. You go in hard, you go in fast. Get to the tower, and you cut the head off the snake." "And the lieutenants?" she asked. A cold, dangerous light entered Naruto's eyes. "Leave none of them alive." The city of Hiroshima screamed. The culling ritual barrier, a dome of black energy pulsing with malevolent purple light, had become a pressure cooker of despair. The Star Eater's ritual was reaching its apex. The negative energy generated by the mass slaughter was coalescing, twisting, becoming so dense that it was beginning to tear at the fabric of spacetime. Kenjaku watched on a monitor, his expression one of clinical fascination. He had no attachment to the city or its people. They were simply variables in his grand experiment. "Fascinating," he murmured. "The sheer density of negative emotion is creating a localized reality failure. It's not just attracting the god, it's creating a resonant frequency, a beacon on a wavelength it can understand." The purple light at the apex of the dome intensified, and then, the barrier didn't just break. It tore. A rift opened in the sky above the city. It was not a clean tear, but a jagged, bleeding wound in the sky. It did not lead to another place, but to a state of being. Through it, the cold, impossible blackness of the void could be seen, a darkness so profound it seemed to have texture. The immense concentration of negative energy, the psychic death scream of an entire city, poured into the rift like a river into the sea. It was the offering. The feast. And something answered. From the rift, a wave of palpable dread washed over the entire western half of Japan. It was a psychic shockwave of pure, cosmic nihilism. It carried with it the silent, crushing truth of a cold, empty universe, the utter insignificance of all life, all struggle, all hope. The Sorcerer King had made his gambit. He had sacrificed a city to save his kingdom. And that sacrifice had just successfully opened the door for the apocalypse. Chapter 8, The Shadow of the Star Eater. The dread arrived before the sound. It was a wave of pure psychic poison that washed over western Japan, a silent tsunami of existential despair. Sorcerers on the front lines faltered, their cursed techniques sputtering as their minds were flooded with an overwhelming sense of futility. Civilians fell to their knees, weeping for reasons they couldn't comprehend. The world, for a moment, seemed to hold its breath, suffocated by an ancient, cosmic sorrow. In the war room at Jujutsu High, the effect was catastrophic. The clone maintaining the map of Japan dissolved into a puff of smoke, its concentration broken. The remaining faculty and students clutched their heads, their faces pale, a sudden, crushing weight pressing down on their souls. It was the feeling of being an insignificant ant under the gaze of an uncaring god. Naruto felt it as a cold, alien presence brushing against the outer walls of his consciousness. It was the antithesis of everything he was, a philosophy of absolute nothingness given form. He gritted his teeth, his own vast inner sun of chakra flaring to life, a shield of pure, indomitable will against the encroaching void. The feeling receded, but the chill remained. What was that? Kyusuke gasped, stumbling against a table, his face ashen. Naruto's eyes were fixed on the new, terrifyingly large energy signature that had just appeared on his internal sensory map. It was centered over Hiroshima. It wasn't a curse. It wasn't a sorcerer. It was a hole in the world. They did it, Naruto said, his voice a low, grim whisper. The ritual in Hiroshima, it worked. Before anyone could react, a frantic voice crackled over the communications network. It was one of Gojo's students, stationed at a watch post 100 miles from the city. Gojo-sensei. He's here. He's heading for Hiroshima. On the main screen, a satellite image flickered to life. It showed a single, blue-white streak moving across the country at impossible speeds. Gojo Satoru, who had been single-handedly containing a disaster in Hokkaido, was now rocketing south, drawn by the same terrifying anomaly they all felt. "He can't face that thing alone," Naruto said, already moving. "It's not a curse. It's something else." He looked at the assembled sorcerers, his face hard. "Hold the line. Continue operations as planned. Do not let the fear break you. That's what it wants." He didn't wait for a reply. He vanished from the room, leaving behind only the echo of his command and a group of terrified sorcerers clinging to his words as their only anchor in a suddenly incomprehensible world. The sky above the ruins of Hiroshima was bleeding. The jagged, black rift pulsed like a wound, and the city below was unnaturally silent. The culling ritual barrier had shattered, but not from force. It had been consumed, devoured by the rift it had helped create. Gojo Satoru hovered in the air a mile away, the wind whipping through his white hair. His 6 eyes, for the first time, were showing him something that bordered on true fear. The rift was not a gateway, it was an intrusion. It was a place where the laws of their reality were being actively overwritten by an older, more terrible set of rules. Space, time, and cursed energy were unraveling at its edges. His infinity, the absolute defense, was under a constant, subtle strain just from being near it, like a ship's hull groaning under immense deep-sea pressure. Then, from the rift, it emerged. It was not a creature of flesh and blood. It was a shadow-given form, a silhouette of a colossal, vaguely humanoid entity against the terrifying backdrop of the void. It was 30 stories tall, its limbs long and thin, its shape shifting and uncertain, as if reality couldn't quite agree on its final form. It had no face, only a smooth, dark expanse where one should be. This was not a Matsunoka Gasio. This was its herald, its avatar, a small piece of its consciousness sent to investigate the feast that had been laid for it. The shadow of the Star Eater turned its faceless head, and its gaze fell upon Gojo. Gojo didn't see an attack. He didn't feel a cursed technique. He simply felt the space he occupied being targeted for deletion. The fundamental data of his existence was being questioned by a higher authority. His infinity flared violently, the invisible barrier around him shimmering into visible, concentric blue lines as it fought against the deific pressure. It was like trying to hold back the tide with a teacup. He could do it, but the effort was immense. "So this is what a god feels like," Gojo murmured, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. "How arrogant of me to think I was the only one." A golden streak arrived next to him, resolving into Naruto, his body already cloaked in the fiery, one-tailed version of his chakra avatar. His golden sage mode eyes were locked on the colossal shadow. "Gojo! What is it?" Naruto yelled over the psychic hum that filled the air. "It's a concept." Gojo shouted back, a wild, almost manic grin stretching his face. He was terrified, but he was also more alive than he had ever been. "It's not fighting us. It's unwriting us. Don't let it look at you for too long." The shadow raised a hand, its long, thin fingers stretching towards them. It wasn't a physical attack. The space between them and the hand began to warp, to fold, to erase itself. Distances became meaningless. It was a conceptual strike, unblockable by conventional means. "It's bending space. I'll counter it." Gojo yelled, raising his own hand, preparing to use blue to create a counter-singularity. "Don't!" Naruto commanded, his senses screaming a warning. "It's not bending it, it's eating it. If you create a vacuum, you'll just be feeding it." He acted on pure instinct. He surged forward, leaving Gojo behind, and flew directly into the path of the warping space. The crimson chakra cloak around him intensified, and 9 massive, ethereal tails of pure energy erupted from his back, lashing through the air. He was a miniature sun, a beacon of pure life energy, challenging the encroaching nothingness. He drove his fist forward. Rasengan. The spiraling sphere of chakra slammed not into a physical object, but into the distorted reality itself. The effect was like throwing a lit match into a room full of gasoline. The raw, positive life energy of the Rasengan reacted violently with the void-like nature of the Avatar's power. A violent explosion of paradox erupted. It wasn't light or sound, but a concussive wave of pure information, a screech of binary code as two opposing operating systems tried to run on the same machine. The Avatar staggered back, its form flickering, the attack on space disrupted. It had felt pain. Not physical pain, but a conceptual wound. It had touched something that its fundamental nature could not process. It focused its faceless gaze on Naruto. And for the first time, it registered him. It saw the golden sun of his chakra, the roaring furnace of Kurama's power, the unbreakable will at his core. It saw the sun beacon, the great opposition. And it spoke. Not with a voice, but with a wave of pure thought that washed over Naruto, Gojo, and every living thing for 100 miles. It was a voice of absolute, soul-crushing despair. Why do you struggle? Your existence is a brief, random flicker in an eternity of silence. Your triumphs are meaningless. Your love is a chemical reaction. Your hope is a delusion. All things end. All things return to the beautiful, perfect nothing. Let go. Embrace the silence. The psychic assault was 1,000 times more potent than before. It was not an attack on their memories, but on the very foundation of their will to live. Sorcerers miles away simply gave up. They dropped their weapons, their eyes going dull and empty, their spirits broken. Gojo grunted, his knees buckling in midair. The 6 eyes, which saw everything, were now being forced to see the infinite, pointless heat death of the universe. He saw his own life, his own power, as a meaningless joke in the face of cosmic infinity. For a split second, his will faltered. But Naruto roared. It was a roar of pure, defiant rage. Shut up. The crimson chakra around him exploded outward, forming the full, colossal avatar of Kurama, a mountain-sized fox of malevolent, fiery energy, its 9 tails whipping through the air like appendages of a god. You think silence is beautiful? Naruto's voice, now merged with Kurama's, boomed across the psychic landscape, a counter-broadcast of pure, unadulterated life force. You've never heard a child laugh. You've never shared a bowl of ramen with a friend. You've never seen the look in someone's eyes when you save them. Your silence isn't peace. It's just empty. The Kurama avatar reared back and unleashed a torrent of fire and chakra from its mouth, a wave of pure, life-affirming rage that crashed against the avatar's chest. The shadow stumbled back, its form flickering violently. Naruto's will, his simple, stubborn, idiotic love for the messy, imperfect chaos of life, was as much a weapon as his chakra. It was a concept the Star Eater's avatar could not process. Gojo shook his head, clearing the last of the psychic poison. He looked at the colossal fox avatar beside him, then at the reeling shadow god. Talking to it? You're actually trying to talk no jutsu, a cosmic horror. He laughed, a wild, breathless sound. You are absolutely insane. It's all I've got. Naruto's voice boomed from the avatar. Now, are you going to help me, or what? Right. Gojo's confidence surged back, fueled by his ally's impossible defiance. Let's show this thing what a couple of real gods can do. What followed was a battle of myths. The shadow of the Star Eater attacked by deleting reality. It pointed a finger, and a line of non-existence would lance towards them. It gestured, and the air itself would unravel. Gojo became a god of space. He used blue to warp the avatar's attacks into each other. He used red to blast apart the wounds in reality it was creating. And when an attack got too close, he pushed his limitless to its absolute extreme, using hollow purple not as an attack, but as a surgical tool, stitching the torn fabric of space-time back together. It was a feat of cursed energy manipulation so sublime, so ridiculously complex, that no one else in history could have even conceived of it. Naruto, meanwhile, was a god of life. The Kurama avatar was a being of pure, physical force and indomitable will. It met the avatar's conceptual attacks with raw, overwhelming power. It clawed, it bit, it fired volley after volley of smaller, faster-tailed beast bombs that exploded with the force of tactical nuclear weapons. Each one was a concentrated sphere of life energy that was poison to the avatar's very being. They were a perfect, impossible team. The man who controlled infinity, and the man who was an infinity unto himself. But the avatar was tireless. It was a conduit for a power source that was truly limitless, the void itself. And their reality was finite. Gojo was pouring out cursed energy on a scale that was rapidly draining even his vast reserves. The repeated use of hollow purple was causing his 6 eyes to bleed, crimson tears mixing with the blue of his irises. Naruto was feeling the strain, too. Maintaining the full Kurama avatar was a massive drain, and Kurama himself was still not at full strength after their interdimensional journey. "We can't win this," Gojo yelled, his voice strained. "We can't kill a shadow. We can hold it off, but it will just wear us down until we have nothing left. Then we don't kill it." Naruto roared back, his avatar wrestling with one of the shadow's limbs. "We send it home. The rift. We have to close the rift." Gojo's eyes widened. Of course. The avatar was just a projection. Its power was coming through the wound in the sky. If they could close the door, the puppet would be cut off from its master. But the rift was a vortex of chaotic, anti-reality energy. Getting near it was suicide. "It's too unstable," Gojo shouted. "I can't get close enough to seal it." "You don't have to seal it," Naruto replied, an idea, a desperate, insane gamble, forming in his mind. "You just have to get me there. Give me a path." Gojo understood instantly. He looked at Naruto, then at the rift. It was a mad plan. A suicidal plan. It was their only shot. "You got it," Gojo yelled. He abandoned his defense and focused all of his remaining power on a single, monumental task. He thrust both hands forward, palms facing the rift. Maximum output, blue. Instead of a single point of attraction, he created a pathway, a tunnel through the chaotic energy field, held open by a sustained, controlled river of gravitational force. It was like boring a tunnel through the heart of a hurricane. The strain was immense. Blood poured from Gojo's nose and eyes, and the blue of his 6 eyes began to dim. "The path is open. Go now," he screamed, his voice cracking. Naruto didn't hesitate. The Kurama avatar dissolved, the colossal form shrinking back down into his own body, but the 9 crimson tails of chakra remained, propelling him forward like thrusters. He shot into the tunnel Gojo had created, a golden comet streaking towards the heart of the apocalypse. The avatar, realizing their plan, lunged for him, but Gojo, with the last of his strength, clapped his hands. "Boogie woogie," he yelled, mimicking Tadu's technique on a godlike scale. It wasn't perfect, but he managed to swap the avatar's position with a chunk of the ruined city, buying Naruto the precious seconds he needed. Naruto reached the end of the tunnel. He was in front of the rift, a screaming, bleeding wound in existence. He could feel the absolute nothingness on the other side, calling to him, promising him peace. He brought his hands together, gathering every last scrap of his and Kurama's power. He poured all of his hope, all of his stubborn will, all of his love for the messy, beautiful world he had sworn to protect into one final, cataclysmic attack. He created a tailed beast bomb, but he didn't fire it. He held the swirling sphere of life and death, of creation and destruction, in his hands. "If you want to return everything to silence," he roared at the void, "then eat this." He thrust the tailed beast bomb directly into the rift. The result was not an explosion. It was a cancellation. The bomb, a perfect balance of positive and negative energy, acted as a universal plug for the hole in reality. The rift, a gateway to absolute nothingness, tried to consume it. The bomb, an artifact of ultimate energy, resisted. The two opposing, absolute concepts met, and they annihilated each other. The rift wavered, then, with a final, silent scream that echoed in the soul, it imploded. It collapsed in on itself, taking the tailed beast bomb with it, sealing the wound. The sky above Hiroshima snapped back to normal. The psychic pressure vanished. The shadow of the Star Eater, its connection to the void severed, let out a silent, fading shriek. Its form flickered, dissolved, and then evaporated into nothing, leaving behind only the clean, quiet air. It was over. Gojo, his energy completely spent, fell from the sky, his 6 eyes dim, his body battered. He was caught by a timely shadow clone. Naruto, drained to his very core, his chakra cloak gone, his body screaming in protest, floated in the empty sky for a moment, then began to fall as well. In Kobe, Maki drove her newly forged spear through the chest of the last Star Eater lieutenant. The sacrificial ritual faltered, and the barrier around the city destabilized, flickering out of existence. Her mission was a success. But as she stood on the roof of the port tower, she felt the psychic shockwave, the battle of gods, and the final, terrifying silence. She looked towards Hiroshima, a cold dread clutching her heart. The world had seen the face of its new god. And it had seen 2 men stand against it. They hadn't won a war. They had survived a single, costly battle. Yuji, who had been fighting in a different sector, was gravely injured protecting civilians from the psychic fallout. Gojo, the strongest, had been pushed past his limits, left temporarily blind and powerless. And Naruto, their king, had stared into the abyss and used his own soul as a weapon to seal it shut. The cost of victory had been immense. And the true enemy was still out there, sleeping in the void, now fully aware of their existence. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.